And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 12 noon, a very good afternoon. You're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this Thursday lunchtime. With just 2 days until the coronation, the Republic protest group says it's preparing for its biggest demonstration in its 40-year history. But a former Royal Protection officer warns protesters need to remember they're in the middle of an armed policing operation. Police say anti-royalist placards will not be removed, but officers will adopt an extremely low threshold for any criminal action. Who did what at the Kremlin and why? In the last hour, Russia accuses the US of being behind the attack. But President Zelensky visits The Hague and says it's Putin who should be sentenced for criminal actions. Overnight, Russia launching a wave of retaliatory airstrikes on Ukrainian cities. And the Viking Raider strikes again. Norwegian superstar Erling Haaland breaks the record for the most goals in a Premier League season. He's notched up 35 after scoring against West Ham last night. Is he the best we've ever seen? Also coming up, just why has the Speaker of the House of Commons invited King Charles into his bedroom tomorrow night? All to be revealed after your headlines with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's coming up to 2 minutes past 12, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Police have warned they'll take swift action against anyone who tries to disrupt the King's coronation. Former Royal Protection Officer Simon Morgan says protesters will be in the middle of an armed policing operation and could be mistaken for plotters who wish to cause harm. The Met Police has confirmed 29,000 officers are being deployed to bolster security around the event. Former Liberal Democrat MP Norman Baker says although tighter measures are necessary, people still have the right to freedom of speech.
If there are terrorists who may see this as a golden opportunity to make a statement, of course we must make sure security is absolutely firm to try and identify those people and curb them. But it's also important that the police understand that the criminality which may occur is perfectly proper to stop and to curb, but that's different from legitimate, legal, peaceful protest, which should not be curbed. It's very important that people do allow peaceful protest. And let me be clear for the viewers, this is not about whether you agree with them or not. Yes. This is about the right to protest in this country.
Ukraine's president says Russia's Vladimir Putin must be brought to justice for the war in his country. Volodymyr Zelensky made the comments during a meeting at The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based. It comes after the war-torn country said it shot down 18 of 24 drones in an overnight attack. Bombardment follows a strike on the Kremlin, with Moscow accusing Kyiv of trying to assassinate President Putin. President Zelensky's denied any involvement, saying he wants to see the Russian leader brought to justice.
Of course, we all want to see different Vladimir here, in The Hague. The one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions right here in the capital of the international law. And I'm sure we will see that happen when we win, and we will win.
2 Palestinian gunmen suspected of shooting dead a British-Israeli woman and her daughters have been killed in an Israeli raid. Maya and Rena D, who were 20 and 15, died when their car was targeted in West Bank last month. Their mother, Lucy D, died in hospital a few days later. Israel says a third militant also died during the operation. Voting is underway in the local elections, with millions of people expected to take part. Around 8,000 seats are up for grabs. 4 mayoral elections are also taking place: Bedford, Leicester, Mansfield and Middlesbrough. It's the first time voters are required to show photo ID, such as a passport or driver's licence, in order to cast a ballot. Polls close at 10 this evening, with the results announced tomorrow. A UK regulator has launched a review of artificial intelligence. The report will look at the tools and algorithms used to train computers to process and analyse data. The Competition and Markets Authority is focusing on competitiveness and consumer protection. It aims to ensure the developing technology isn't misleading people nor giving them false information. 40% of inmates in a Scottish prison say they've been abused, threatened, bullied or assaulted by staff. A review also found only 29% of the inmates said they felt safe. Inspectors who visited HMP Adderwell have raised concerns about the safety and security of the facility. A spokesperson for the prison says they accept full responsibility and admit they must improve. Travellers from Heathrow Airport can expect disruption and delays as security guards take further industrial action. That's after last-minute talks over a pay dispute failed yesterday. 1,400 Unite union members have started a 3-day walkout today. It's part of an 8-day programme of strikes throughout the month. Labour and the Lib Dems have called for a robust windfall tax after oil giant Shell reported a profit of £7.66 billion in the first quarter of this year. Shell joined rivals BP in significantly beating expectations. The profits dropped slightly from the previous quarter as energy prices cooled, but it's still making almost £1.4 billion more than expected. And 6 green apprenticeships have been selected to mark the King's coronation for their contribution in creating a low-carbon economy. They include low-carbon heating technicians, countryside workers and forest craftspeople. It's hoped they'll encourage more people to work in the green industry. It also aims to ensure the country's workforce is equipped with the skills needed to support the transition to net zero. The government and employers will use the coronation emblem to promote the apprenticeships, selected as the gold standard for green skills training. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. So, with Republic protesters warning they're preparing for their biggest demonstration at the coronation in their 40-year history, a former Royal Protection Officer has taken the unprecedented step of warning them publicly that they'll be in the middle of an armed policing operation. Well, police themselves say they'll take swift action against anyone who disrupts the event, although anti-royalist placards will not be removed, they say. Let's get the very latest now with our royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who's down outside Buckingham Palace. And Cameron, lots of people there enjoying the occasion, but we have to say an unprecedented number of police very visibly on the streets now as well, many of them armed.
Absolutely, Mark, and even in the last few days, it's very clear to see that the policing operation has really ramped up here in central London over the last couple of days. In fact, one person I was speaking to yesterday who has covered many of these sort of royal events dating right back to the wedding, actually, of Diana and Prince Charles, was saying she has never seen a security operation quite like this. Clearly, we had that security incident outside Buckingham Palace on Tuesday night, where a man allegedly threw shotgun cartridges over the gate. He was arrested. There was a controlled explosion by police as well. So clearly there are some nerves among security officials at the palace and the government to keep everybody safe and make sure that the coronation runs as smoothly as possible. As you said, Mark, police are saying that protesters who disrupt the coronation can expect very swift action, and police have an extremely low threshold with dealing with them. But I think we have to distinguish between peaceful protests and those who seek to cause disruption. Republic, for example, the anti-monarchy protesters, they are expected to be in Trafalgar Square. They are hoping for at least 1,000 people to be there and holding the big yellow placard saying "Not my king." But they insist that they are going to be both peaceful, but they are going to be extremely noisy, but they're not going to disrupt proceedings. That's what they say. They have been in contact with the Metropolitan Police, they tell us as well, and the Metropolitan Police have told them that they have no issue with them holding that peaceful protest. But there is an issue with protest groups such as Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil, who have been known in the past to cause disruption. So that is some concern for officials. But as for today, there is a visible police presence on the streets, particularly on the Mall. I was walking up earlier. There were both plainclothes police officers and uniformed police officers. Lots and lots of tourists here, and I suspect it's only going to ramp up as we get closer towards the coronation.
Yeah. For the moment, Cameron, thank you for that. Back to you in a moment. But let's bring you some breaking news we're getting in from Ireland, where former US President Donald Trump has been or is about to cut short his trip at his golf resort there. He's going to return to the United States to confront his accuser in the New York civil rape case. He's just been telling reporters, he's describing it as a political attack. He spoke to reporters outside the resort at the village of Doonbeg in County Clare a few minutes ago, saying he will probably attend the hearing itself. Trump saying he's been falsely accused, going on to say, "I'm going back to New York. I was falsely accused by this woman. I have no idea who she is. It's ridiculous. I'm going back because a woman can make a claim that is totally false. It's fake." Also going further to say his accuser was a Democrat and that the judge was a rough judge. "He doesn't like me very much. He was appointed by Bill Clinton," he asserted. He added, "It's a disgrace, but we have to do it. It's part of life. It's a fake claim like all the other claims, just like Russia, Russia, Russia. It's a political scam." So that's the situation in Ireland. No details as to when he'll be flying off, but clearly he's cutting that visit short. He spoke to, of course, Nigel Farage here on GB News last night. We will update you as we get more from Doonbeg. But as we've just been discussing with Cameron, nearly 30,000 police officers on duty in the capital this weekend. It's the largest policing operation for a generation, even more than we had for the funeral of the Queen. The King's coronation seeing a deployment of more than 500 officers on top of what we saw for the funeral, 11,500 in total. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, now reports that police and security services are preparing to deal with threats that could range from international terrorism to those protests from activists.
Around the garrison town of Aldershot, these guardsmen of the Household Division have spent recent days rehearsing for their part in the coronation ceremony. Number 18 Company! They'll form the King's Guard, escorting the Sovereign's carriage to and from Westminster Abbey, in what will amount to the biggest ceremonial and security operation seen on the streets of the capital for many years. Coordinated by the Metropolitan Police, the operation will bring together all of the emergency services, the military and the security services.
It's
security operation around the coronation is rather significant. It's very similar to the Queen's funeral. We've got a layered approach that consists of a number of actually very visible policing presence. So we've got our mounted officers, our firearms officers, and we've got our military colleagues. So this is a joint effort.
Tuesday evening's security incident at Buckingham Palace demonstrated the rapid reaction of the police. Thousands will be on duty alongside the military. Understandably, these soldiers are immensely proud of the part they're playing in this huge state occasion. They're not expecting any trouble, but they're highly trained and able to respond to anything untoward.
We do a lot of practice, ensure that things that go wrong don't go wrong because we've ironed them out in the first place. But then our military training kicks in. We're used to, challenges, and our training helps with these situations.
Saturday's coronation is all the more complex given the many heads of state and other VIPs from around the world who'll descend on the capital for the ceremony.
They'll be looking through the intelligence picture, they'll be working with single issue groups trying to work out who might be a threat to the coronation. But, the threats can come from the sewers right up to the skies with drones, so they really have to be alert on the day.
In the days ahead, the public will certainly notice the huge increase in security, not just around central London, but in other population centres where coronation celebrations are taking place. Luckily, the police and security services have had many months to plan this operation. But then, so have those who might be intent on disrupting this huge world event.
Mark updating us there with the picture and the scene down in the Mall and elsewhere. Mark is in the studio with us now, as is veteran royal correspondent Michael Cole. And I mean veteran in the nicest possible way, because you have been in these situations before. You've stood shoulder to shoulder with these royal protection officers. They've got a really difficult decision now. When do we intervene? When do we actually just stand back and let the protests have their say?
Freedom of speech and peaceful assembly are two of the glories of this constitutional monarchy, which we are lucky enough to live in. And that reaches its very peak on Saturday. And I'm quite happy for those people to shout and hold up their placards, as long as they do it peacefully. And I know some of the people in Republic, Graham Smith and others, and I'm sure they'll be true to their word.
And he said that they've spoken to police about where they're going to be and what they're going to be doing. We ought to make that plain.
Your point is absolutely fantastic, because it's made me think of Her Majesty the Queen, the late Queen. She was always guided by the security services, but she never, to my certain knowledge, ever refused to go anywhere. China, Russia, Canada, Quebec, at the height of the French separatism, there was plenty of activity there. She always went. She took the advice, and invariably she said, let's do it. The problem is, Mark has just outlined it, you've put the question. It's impossible now to have a major event anywhere in the world without overwhelming security. How much is too much? 29,000 police officers. It does make me wonder who's policing the rest of the country. But 29,000, that's a jolly good crowd for a championship football match on that particular day. It is a lot. Of course, the nightmare is for the police, and that's what's keeping them awake at night, the lone fanatic, the one-issue zealot who wants to make a name for himself.
Or something done on the spur of the moment. Well, let's bring Mark in, because we have got this unprecedented intervention by Simon Morgan, this former Royal Protection Officer, saying, look, all these activists and protesters need to be aware this is an armed policing operation. Literally, that phrase, hair trigger. If that, bodyguard decides, no, this is going a bit too far, there will be direct intervention.
Yeah, I know Si very well from when he worked for SCO 19, the armed response teams of the Metropolitan Police. And this is absolutely correct, that you have lots of armed officers and close protection officers with all these heads of state and VIPs from all around the world who are going to be there in what can sometimes be a busy and confused picture. You'll see carefully choreographed as best they can, whisking in and out of the VIPs down into central London and to Westminster Abbey. But of course, every time these motorcades under escort head in towards Westminster Abbey, there's always the potential for people to jump out in front of them, to, as we've heard, some threats of rape alarms being set off to spook the horses.
Yeah.
You just never know. And clearly, if someone runs towards a head of state, a VIP, then yeah, that particular armed officer has got a judgment to make. Does this look like an activist? Does this look like someone who may be potentially going to cause severe harm?
We should, of course, reassure the public that there is no indication of any direct outstanding threat. This is just a precautionary measure. However, one reflects that the procession both ways is going to be actually at quite a slow pace because the carriages, the traditional carriages being used.
Yeah, you're right. There's no specific threat from international terrorism that the police and security services are aware of, but it comes against a threat picture, of course, of multiple attacks that have been launched in recent years and continue in terms of plots to cause terrorist attacks to this day. They've disrupted dozens of plots in the last few years. And as Michael was saying, it's these lone individuals nowadays that cause the most concern, because when you have a big sophisticated plot, people are communicating with each other, they're buying ingredients.
They call it.
You can pick up on that if you're security services. If it's an individual being radicalised online, he goes into his mother's kitchen, picks up a knife, gets into the dad's car, then, you know, how do you actually get sight of that before it happens?
And get the intelligence, Now, the other aspect is, Mike, you've been down there and you've tasted the atmosphere. And we've seen previously that when the yellow-shirted Republic protesters have turned up saying, "Not my king," there's been a response from the others in the crowd. This could also be a bit of a flashpoint if those royalists actually take issue with what's being done.
I think the police have actually said to the people who are going to demonstrate, do you realise that you may be opening yourself up to counter-demonstrations and people who won't like it and will feel they have to protest against it? Well, we hope they don't take the law into their own hands. The thing is, and you've just mentioned it, the processional route is nearly 1.5 miles there and 1.5 miles back. How do you defend against something that you don't know about? There are evil people out there. There are people who are not on the radar, sadly enough. And there are people who simply don't care. They're eco-egotists. They just think, do they think that we don't worry about the climate problem? Do they think that we don't take precautions?
And King Charles, perhaps the biggest champion for, what, 30, 40 years?
40 years ago. Yeah. I mean, it's probably too much to actually say to these people, have a conscience. There'll be thousands of small children there. Be the greatest day of their life for many, many ordinary people and important people from all over the world. Have a bit of conscience, hold back, show a bit of responsibility, show a bit of heart, show a bit of Britishness.
Because we're on show internationally, that's the other aspect. Yeah. Michael, Mark, thank you both very much indeed. And as you know, we hope it does pass off peacefully, but we'll keep monitoring the security position as, of course, it is reassessed constantly. Also coming out, reassessment of international situation with Russia, now accusing the United States of being behind that attack on the Kremlin. We'll have the latest as Zelensky is visiting The Hague. More coming up in a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, Ukraine's President Zelensky has been making an unexpected visit to The Hague in the Netherlands, the home of the International Criminal Court, and he's called for Vladimir Putin to be sentenced for criminal actions. Well, of course, that visit coming after fresh missile attacks were launched on cities across Ukraine, Russia accusing both Kyiv and now the US of being involved in the drone attack on the Kremlin. Well, President Zelensky has since dismissed those accusations, saying his country is only fighting the Russians on its own territory. In the last few minutes, the White House National Security spokesman, John Kirby, said the claims were false and that the US would not encourage Ukraine to strike outside its borders. Let's get more now. The former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, Major General Chip Chapman, joining us once more. Chip, thank you for your time. This is getting quite sort of murky, isn't it, in terms of claim and counter-claim, but Zelensky's certainly trying to take the initiative by turning up at The Hague.
Yeah, and there's 3 reasons he's really done that. Firstly, he's got to try and keep the moral high ground. Secondly, he's got to still play the line that Russia is the aggressor, which it is. And thirdly, that he's been invaded. And in lots of ways, this has been a bad diplomatic week for Russia. The first one is that in the United Nations General Assembly, China and India for the first time voted for a motion which called Russia the aggressor. Secondly, Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, told Putin, don't come to the BRICS meeting in August because we will arrest you and send you to the ICC. And thirdly, a joint statement yesterday of the Nordic Ukrainian meeting, which was in Finland, told Russia to leave and all its troops should go away. So it's been a bad diplomatic week for Russia. But the drone attack, from his perspective, is really for the internal audience as much as anything. You know, Moscow is the center of the Russian world. It is where the May Day victory parade should be on the 9th of May. And this could be a catalyst for either cancelling that or, more importantly, to try and mobilize the Russian people to these direct attacks on the center of the Russian world and try and mobilize people for the future. And that's been his problem at the moment. After the mobilization in September, he's now going to be running short of troops again. So he needs to try and re-evangelize, in a way, the Russian people to say this is a holy war. And it's that holy war aspect which the Victory Day parade normally plays into.
I just wonder if you've had any more thoughts specifically on what happened with the Kremlin. I know that the Washington-based think tank, The Study of War, says it's extremely unlikely 2 drones could have penetrated multiple layers of air defence and then been detonated or shot down just over the heart of the Kremlin in a way that provided spectacular imagery caught nicely on camera, close quotes.
There's a lot of truth in that, but if you're a real analyst, you would say you work in probability yardsticks, and you would ask the question, why would one or the other side do this? So from a Ukrainian side, it is highly unlikely, but that gives you a 25 to 35% chance. Why might the Ukrainians have done it? They might have done it for either psychological reasons, we can get to the Kremlin, or they might have done it for reasons of reach. We now have drones which can go that far. But really, there are very few upsides from a Ukrainian perspective. You know, it could be seen as escalatory and could lose, therefore, the support of the international community. The upsides for Russia and why Russia may have done it, and that's why I see that as more of a realistic possibility in probability yardsticks, that gives it a 40 or 50% chance, is to do with those facts, to do with mobilization. But I think we will ultimately know, because one of the things that came out of the February leaks in America is the power of the penetration of the US intelligence community. So in terms of both their human intelligence coverage, their signals intelligence coverage, SIGINT, their satellite intelligence coverage, and their MASINT coverage, that's measurement and signature intelligence, I think they would know fairly quickly where the origin of these drones came from and what the target was. And the last point on that is the Russians said that they knocked it down by electronic warfare means. That normally is a threat neutralization by jamming the GPS signal. It doesn't lead to an explosive warhead. And you saw sort of an explosion somewhere over the dome of that Kremlin, which seems slightly suspicious to me. So it's still speculation, but the probability yardsticks slightly more towards Russia doing it than Ukraine.
Also, perhaps wonders whether the Ukrainians would have had the intelligence briefings or knowing his movements, that Putin was not in the Kremlin at the time. He's obviously got this sort of bunker outside Moscow, even though I gather this dome that was hit is where the living quarters are within the Kremlin.
Well, I think you have to be careful again on the use of language here. So many missiles and drones have hit Kiev, and not once have the Ukrainians said this was a direct assault on Zelensky. So the word that this was an assassination of Putin has come directly from the Russians, and we're playing along with that. So we're sort of playing along with parroting Russian propaganda.
Right.
So it was whatever it was an attack on the heart of Moscow in the Russian world. Was it an assassination attack on Putin? Very, very, very unlikely.
Chip, thank you very much indeed for that. But I think we can actually now cross live to The Hague, where President Zelensky is speaking. Let's have a listen in.
Our common Euro, we will discuss today very important issue, our common Euro-Atlantic security. And it's very important. De facto, Ukraine has already become a part of NATO. We cooperate, we trust each other, and together we truly make Europe stronger. And so it stands to reason that Ukraine should become part of Alliance de Jure, the SOD NATO country. The algorithm of actions in this regard can and should be approved by political decisions at the Vilnius summit of the Alliance this summer, and we count on the support of our partners. Later, we will discuss Ukraine-EU relations, and we are waiting for a positive assessment of progress in implementing recommendation of the European Commission, and we do all our best during the war. We do all reforms what we have to do, and this will be the time when political positive momentum will open the way to a new and long-lasting positive history, both for Ukraine and for the whole Europe. And one more point, I would like to thank you for your support. Our peace formula, it's 10 very points that can restore not only our territorial integrity and security, but also can reliably guarantee the long-term security of Europe and the world. This is our joint task, to restore the full force of the UN Charter and international law in general. everything that was violated by Putin and Russia. Peace calls for sanctions to be stronger, for the isolation of Russia to be more complete. Peace calls for assets of terrorist state to be confiscated, and peace calls damages to be repaired and ruins to be rebuilt. And I'm sure we will do it together. Thanks again to you, Mark. Thank you, Alexander.
And he is speaking there with the Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte at this meeting at The Hague. And clearly, the indication there from President Zelensky is that they really want to push this NATO membership for Ukraine, also indicating that there'll be a meeting on EU relations, saying that we'd like to thank you for the support and to guarantee the long-term security of not just Europe, but the world. And as we were just indicating a little earlier, President Zelensky indicating that Ukraine would not have considered launching this strike on the Kremlin, indicating that they would only launch attacks, indeed, on their defending their own territory. And indications, of course, now that Russia has also started to blame the United States for being involved in that attack on the Kremlin by encouraging Ukraine to launch that drone strike. So we'll update you as we get more there from The Hague. But also coming up, we'll be talking about car sales in the UK at full speed ahead. What are we buying and why? We'll be updating on that. First, an update on all the news headlines with Rhiannon.
It's 12:34, your top stories from the GB newsroom. Breaking news this hour, Donald Trump is cutting his trip to Ireland short, saying he's going back to New York to confront his accuser in a civil rape case. The former US president, who's been visiting his golf courses, has described the case as a political attack and says he'll probably attend the hearing. He's been accused of raping a former magazine columnist in 1996, which he denies. Police have warned they'll take swift action against anyone who tries to disrupt the King's coronation. Former Royal Protection Officer Simon Morgan says protesters will be in the middle of an armed policing operation and could be mistaken for plotters who wish to cause harm. The Met Police has confirmed 29,000 officers are being deployed to bolster security around the event. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's Vladimir Putin must be brought to justice for the war in his country. He made the comments during a meeting at The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based. It comes after the war-torn country said it shot down 18 of 24 drones in an overnight attack. That bombardment followed a strike on the Kremlin, with Moscow accusing Kyiv of trying to assassinate President Putin. Two Palestinian gunmen suspected of shooting dead a British-Israeli woman and her daughters have been killed in an Israeli raid. Maya and Rena D, who are 20 and 15, died when their car was targeted in West Bank last month. Their mother, Lucy D, died in hospital a few days later. Israel says a third militant also died during the operation. And voting's underway in the local elections, with millions of people expected to cast their ballot. Around 8,000 seats across 230 local authorities in England are up for grabs. It's the first time voters are required to show photo ID to vote. Polls close at 10 this evening, with the results announced tomorrow. TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Mark will be back in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Live. Now, let's tell you that it seems car sales are at full speed in the UK. The Society of Motor Manufacturers reporting an 11.6% rise in new registrations in April. Those numbers up for the 9th month in a row. And after months, of course, slow production and problems with supply chain shortages, particularly the electronic chips, these figures mark, well, the best performing start to the year since before the pandemic. Let's get more with Liam with On the Money. So it's good news overall, but still a bit of a question mark about EVs, electric vehicles. You know, what are we buying and why are we buying them?
This economy of ours, Mark, as we discuss pretty much every day, there's such mixed signals, aren't there? You've got good business sentiment surveys, but then you've got manufacturing performance below 50 on the PMI, showing that manufacturing is actually contracting. We've got mortgage approvals up, and now we've got some really quite strong numbers for car sales from what we call the SMMT, the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. We try and bring you these every month. Let's just have a look at them. SMMT is saying that 132,990 cars were registered in April, new cars. That's up 11.6% on April 2022, as you said. Just go back to the graphic, but it's still 17% lower than in 2019. So car sales, I wouldn't quite say they're at full speed. They're
still trying to pick up.
They're
certainly gearing up.
Yeah.
But we're still about a fifth lower than we were before the pandemic. What was interesting to me also is how the kind of scope of car by type is changing. Petrol cars, as we can see here, they were 42.8% of sales in April. Diesel cars were down just at 4.4%. These, it's pure diesel. Then we had what we call MHEVs, multi-hybrid electric vehicles. They're both, mild hybrid electric vehicles. They're hybrids that kind of charge themselves. They're not plug-in.
So they've
hybrids.
got a battery.
Yeah, they've got a battery, and as you drive, it charges the battery.
Yeah.
So then you can switch the battery,
Yeah.
and then you can also fill it up. So you don't have that range anxiety. They were 18.5% of sales, and pure battery electric vehicles, they were 15.4%.
So it begs the question, are people still sitting on their hands as to what they buy when they go in? Because, I mean, certainly we've got the AA and the RAC saying, look, diesel prices at the pump are inflated. They shouldn't be that high. So clearly no one's going to buy diesel. And we've still got this, 2030 cut-off hanging over us as to when the government wants all combustion engines, effectively, to be banned.
Well, combustion engines in new cars. If you've got a car, it won't be driven off the road.
Keep Ford Anglia going.
That's currently where it is at 2030. I think that may slip to 2035, where sales of pure petrol, pure diesel new cars will be banned, because it's moved to 2035 in the European Union under big pressure from the German car lobby. I tell you what's really interesting here, though. Diesel sales, they are falling rapidly. As I said earlier, mild hybrid electric vehicles, they're now 18.5%. Battery electric vehicles, they're 15.4%. Overall, about a third of new cars sold are now electric vehicles. But get this, Mark, this is the interesting thing. The SMMT, which is a very, very influential body, represents, basically the entire car industry here in the UK, not just manufacturers, but retailers, finance companies and all the rest of it. They are now starting to downgrade their estimates of the growth of purely battery electric vehicles. Why are they doing that? They're doing it because of a lack of charging infrastructure, so-called range anxiety, plus the fact that energy itself is becoming more costly. If your electricity bill's through the roof...
It's not a cheap option.
It's not necessarily as cheap an option. And I discussed these issues with Emma Butcher of the SMMT. Here she is.
What we are seeing is concern over those broader economic challenges that we're seeing, the cost of living crisis, the rising cost of energy. That all has an impact on what you might decide to buy next. And equally, the huge obstacle that we face is a real paucity of charging infrastructure. So that's really putting a lot of buyers off making that leap into an electric car.
So question marks, but, let's take the lesson. They're saying consumer demand is strong. Another indication that there is a bit more sort of robustness, perhaps, in terms of what we want to buy and when. People are putting their hand in their pocket a bit.
Consumer demand is strong, Mark. I think a lot of it is just pent-up demand from the pandemic and trying to sort of spring ourselves, many households, from the endless doom and gloom. Yes, consumer demand's strong, but consumer credit growth is also strong. The housing market is staying relatively, I wouldn't say stable, but at least it hasn't lurched downwards a great deal. So you've got lots of mortgage equity withdrawal going on. But I'll just go back to what the SMMT said. This is an organisation that's very, very close to the government, constantly in contact with ministers. They're not going to want to say things that upset ministers, OK, given the importance of the car industry. And they just referred there to a real paucity of charging infrastructure. And it may be that they are now pushing the government to invest more, to roll out more of those charging points. I mean, I know from my life, anecdotally, a lot of people I know, they've bought a plug-in hybrid or an electric vehicle, a battery-operated electric vehicle, and they find that they have to build in extra time into their journey.
To queue at the charging point.
To queue at the charging point, because there simply aren't enough charging points. And this is illustrative to me of the fact that a lot of ministers, they want to make the push for net zero, they want all the kind of virtue signalling headlines.
But haven't thought it through.
But the actual detail of how to achieve it is a lot harder in practice than in theory.
Yeah, more than range anxiety, it's charging anxiety in general. Thanks for taking us through those figures, and of course more economic news coming up, plenty of it, giving us a snapshot of where we are. Now, meanwhile, the countdown to the coronation ramping up with less than 48 hours to go. Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker outside Buckingham Palace for us. And Cameron, certainly we were talking about the security situation, which is also ramping up. But let's, on the lighter side, reflect that lots of people are taking to the streets to enjoy the occasion. It may rain on their parade. That's the latest we're getting on the weather forecast. Is that right?
Yeah, the weather doesn't look ideal for Saturday, Mark. I think it's meant to be cloudy in the morning, but it looks like there are going to be some showers during that coronation procession with the Golden State Coach that happens post-ceremony from around 1 p.m. From Westminster Abbey's Buckingham Palace. But if you remember back to 1953 or pictures you've seen in 1953, you would have seen there that it was actually raining for the late Queen's coronation as well, and it certainly didn't dampen people's spirits. And the atmosphere here on the Mall is electric. More and more people keep turning up, just trying to take in the atmosphere. There's music playing in the background, as you might be able to hear, and people have travelled from all over the world to come and see the historic occasion. I can see just to my left here, there's some amazing royal fans from the United States of America with American flags and placards supporting His Majesty the King as well. Later on this afternoon, we are expecting the Prince and Princess of Wales to be in central London. They're going to Soho to the Dog and Duck pub.
Cameron, I'm just going to interrupt you because we've just got some royal guests who are about to join us. We're going to take you to the Dog and Duck. Not very often we say that, but this is a scene in Soho because we have the Prince and Princess of Wales arriving there as part of the preparations for the coronation day, and clearly there's a big crowd there we can see behind the barriers, and yes, the police there arriving because given what we've been discussing in terms of the security situation, hopefully that police might move out of the way of our camera, but certainly this is part of the sort of out and about, if you like, in terms of other members of the royal family apart from the King and the Queen Consort. And the cheers. There we are. Not a Republican protester to be seen. No yellow T-shirts. And they've actually gone in there to... well, I'm not sure if it is the Dog and Duck or whether it's a hotel there in Soho. Anyway, we shall see what they enjoy. Yes, it is. There we are, the Dog and Duck. We'll see what they enjoy as their lunchtime refreshment. Let's bring Cameron back in as we look at these pictures. Cameron, I'm just wondering what the Prince of Wales's favourite tipple is.
Oh, I think we'll have to wait and see what he drinks inside the pub, Mark. Yeah, right on cue there. He entering the Dog and Duck pub, speaking to people in the hospitality and the recreation industry. It's expected to be actually quite a short visit inside the pub itself, but clearly pubs up and down the nation are going to be celebrating across this coronation weekend. They have been given extended opening hours to try and encourage more celebrations, expected to add millions of pounds to the economy. From various experts have predicted that, including the British Beer and Pub Association, expected £120 million this weekend. But following the Prince and Princess of Wales's visit, Mark, so it's probably best to keep an eye on those pictures. We are expecting their Royal Highnesses to do a walkabout with the crowds who have gathered outside from very early this morning, actually. And of course, this is all happening as rehearsals have been going on with senior members of the royal family. Yesterday, we saw the King and Queen Consort, along with the Prince and Princess of Wales, their three children as well, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis. Prince George, of course, is being one of his grandfather's pages on the day, but also perhaps some children not as well known as those three Wales children is Gus and Louis Lopez, as well as Freddie Parker Bowles, who are the Queen Consort's grandchildren from her first marriage. And it's Gus and Louis and Freddie are all going to be her pages, but Gus has actually broken his arm. So as we understand it, he broke his arm recently on a biking accident while on holiday. So he's actually going to have to be in a sling for the coronation itself. He's expected to be holding Her Majesty's robes on the day, but clearly well enough to carry on with the rehearsals and indeed the day itself. And there's been garden parties and all sorts. So I think we're seeing the members of the royal family here, official duties, official rehearsals, but making sure that they have time to greet members of the public and thank them for their support.
As you say, they were all at Westminster Abbey yesterday for a full rehearsal. But interesting to see there the Prince of Wales without a tie, looking a bit more relaxed and perhaps just taking the opportunity in the days ahead of the coronation to be slightly more relaxed and all the pomp and circumstance that he'll have to go through on the day itself.
Oh, absolutely. Perhaps this is a little bit of his downtime, because on the day itself, he is going to be the only blood prince to physically kneel down in front of his father, the king, and pay homage to him. Usually there would be what's called the homage of the peers, where many blood princes and dukes and hereditary peers would have done the same thing. But as we understand it, it's only going to be Prince William who is going to be doing that. We are expecting the Prince and Princess of Wales to be seen out and about in public a number of times in the run-up to the coronation, and it wouldn't surprise me if we also see them out and about for the big lunch, and also perhaps some of the volunteering work that's going to be going on Monday, although that has not been confirmed by Kensington Palace as of yet. But for now, of course, they're just going into a pub, good old British tradition, having a few pints with some of the hospitality industry who have really struggled over the last few years because of the pandemic. But weekends like this, like the coronation, like the Jubilee last year, it's a real chance for them to celebrate with members of the public and indeed make a decent income.
And I suspect after the royal couple are left, a lot of those American tourists in London will be beating a path to the door, the Dog and Duck, and enjoying a traditional pint or a half a pint, who knows. Cameron, for the moment, in Buckingham Palace, or outside Buckingham Palace, thanks for updating us on that. We'll bring you the latest pictures as we get them. Now, let's reflect on a new drug that's giving hope that the horrible progress that Alzheimer's makes can be halted. Indeed, it's the second drug in under a year that's been shown to slow the disease. Scientists calling that hugely exciting. Well, the Alzheimer's Society calling it the beginning of the end for the disease. Now, the drug is from the Eli Lilly firm, the US pharmaceutical giant. It's called donanemab, and there are already calls for it to be licensed here as soon as possible. But concerns, too, about the ability of health professionals to diagnose the illness in time for it to have a big enough impact. Well, joining us now is NHS GP Natalie Rout once more. Natalie, thanks for your time here on GB News. And I guess therein lies the difficulty for you and other practitioners. It's actually identifying, first of all, what type of dementia, and once you've got that diagnosis, getting the drug into the system quickly enough, because I think it's done with an infusion, isn't it? Natalie, we've just got a problem with the sound at the moment. We'll just try and get a better link and make sure that we can hear you loud and clear. But I was just making the point, obviously, that the key, as we say, is getting it into someone quickly enough. I think we can hear you now. How quickly could you see patients to get that process started?
Well, these drugs won't be available on the NHS anytime soon. They still need to be approved and going through all of that drug trial. So it's likely to be at least a year before these drugs are being used. And like you quite rightly said, they're only really suitable for the earlier stages of dementia, not necessarily those who are already suffering with severe Alzheimer's. So it will be something that needs to be decided by the specialists to determine whether they'll be eligible. And these are very expensive drugs, very expensive drugs. So it's a big decision as to whether it will be suitable for the NHS to fund.
And as I understand it, it actually works in terms of using the body's own immune system to attack the amyloids, the toxic buildup that affects the brain. So therefore, for instance, it wouldn't be applicable where you've got vascular dementia, where you've got the blood supply being limited to the brain, for instance.
That's absolutely correct. So in Alzheimer's disease, you see buildup of things called amyloid plaques, which surround the nerves and therefore impair the nerve transmission in the brain. So these drugs that have been identified are forms of immunotherapy where the body is able to sort of break down those plaques. It would not be useful in other types of dementia like vascular dementia or Lewy body dementia that we see in Parkinson's disease. But the results have been promising at slowing down that process of the dementia progressing, because as we know, Alzheimer's is irreversible and progressive. So this isn't necessarily a cure for Alzheimer's, but it's certainly something that would slow down progression and allow people to live maybe a few more years.
And do there have to be further trials? Because I understand there have been side effects, maybe possibly 3 deaths with brain swelling as a side effect, which is obviously a bit of a problem.
It's a very severe side effect. And like you said, there were 3 deaths already in the trial so far. We also don't know the long-term impacts of the medication. I believe the trial only ran for 18 months with this newer drug. So we really need to see exactly how much benefit we can gain from administering a drug that has such severe side effects.
Well, thank you very much indeed for bringing us what could be good news indeed. As you say, despite all the indications that it may not be that quick or certainly in terms of other issues, but a start anyway, which is very encouraging. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching GB News Live. Coming up, more on the coronation this next hour, the protests, the placards, perhaps even a pint at the Dog and Duck with, yes, the Prince and Princess of Wales coming up in this next hour.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1 o'clock. You're with GB News Live. A very good afternoon to you. I'm Mark Longhurst, and coming up for you this Thursday lunchtime, let's go down the Dog and Duck with the Prince and Princess of Wales. They're visiting the pub in Soho just 2 days before the coronation. Meanwhile, the Republic protest group says it's preparing for its biggest demonstration in its 40-year history. Also coming up, who did what, when and why at the Kremlin. In the last hour, the US National Security Advisor dismissing Russian claims that Washington was behind the drone attack on the Kremlin. During his visit to The Hague today, President Zelensky said Vladimir Putin should be in the city to face charges at the International Court. And going home early, Donald Trump cutting short his visit to Ireland so he can confront, as he said, a woman who's accused him of rape. The former president says he'll probably attend the civil hearing itself in New York. Also coming up, just why has the Speaker of the House of Commons invited King Charles into his bedchamber tomorrow night? All to be revealed shortly after the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1:01. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prince and Princess of Wales are visiting the Dog and Duck in Soho ahead of the coronation weekend. Large crowds turned up to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. They're in the entertainment district to hear how the pub's getting ready for the big event. The pair waved at fans as they made their way into the venue to speak to members of staff. Meanwhile, police have warned they'll take swift action against anyone who tries to disrupt the King's coronation. Former Royal Protection Officer Simon Morgan says protesters will be in the middle of an armed policing operation and could be mistaken for plotters who wish to cause harm. The Met Police has confirmed 29,000 officers are being deployed to bolster security around the event. Former Liberal Democrat MP Norman Baker says although tighter measures are necessary, people still have the right of freedom of speech.
If there are terrorists who may see this as a golden opportunity to make a statement, of course we must make sure security is absolutely firm to try and identify those people and curb them. But it's also important that the police understand that the criminality which may occur is perfectly proper to stop and to curb, but that's different from legitimate, legal, peaceful protest, which should not be curbed. It's very important that people do allow peaceful protest. And let me be clear for the viewers, this is not about whether you agree with them or not. Yes. This is about the right to protest in this country.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's Vladimir Putin must be brought to justice for the war in his country. He made the comments during a meeting at The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based. It comes after the war-torn country said it shot down 18 of 24 drones in an overnight attack. The bombardment followed a strike on the Kremlin, with Moscow accusing Kyiv of trying to assassinate President Putin.
Of course, we all want to see different Vladimir here in The Hague. The one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions right here in the capital of the international law. And I'm sure we will see that happen when we win, and we will win.
Donald Trump is cutting short his trip to Ireland, saying he's going back to New York to confront his accuser in a civil rape case. The former US president, who's been visiting his golf courses, has described the case as a political attack and says he'll probably attend the hearing. He's been accused of raping a former magazine columnist in 1996, which he denies. Two Palestinian gunmen suspected of shooting dead a British-Israeli woman and her daughters have been killed in an Israeli raid. Maya and Rena D., who were 20 and 15, died when their car was targeted in West Bank last month. Their mother, Lucy D., died in hospital a few days later. Israel says a third militant also died during the operation. Voting is underway in the local elections, with millions of people expected to cast their ballot. Around 8,000 seats across 230 local authorities in England are up for grabs. 4 mayoral elections are also taking place in Bedford, Leicester, Mansfield and Middlesbrough. It's the first time voters are required to show photo ID to vote. Polls close at 10 this evening, with the results announced tomorrow. Travellers from Heathrow Airport can expect disruption and delay as security guards take further industrial action. That's after last-minute talks over a pay dispute failed yesterday. 1,400 Unite Union members have started a 3-day walkout. It's part of an 8-day programme of strikes throughout the month. Labour and the Lib Dems have called for a robust windfall tax after oil giant Shell reported a profit of £7.66 billion in the first quarter of this year. Shell joined rivals BP in significantly beating expectations. The profits dropped slightly from the previous quarter as energy prices cooled, but it's still making almost £1.4 billion more than expected. And 6 green apprenticeships have been selected to mark the King's coronation for their contribution in creating a low-carbon economy. They include low-carbon heating technicians, countryside workers and forest craftspeople. It's hoped they'll encourage more people to work in the green industry. It also aims to ensure the country's workforce is equipped with the skills needed to support the transition to net zero. The government and employers will use the coronation emblem to promote the apprenticeships selected as the gold standard for green skills entry. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Well, as it's lunchtime, we'll be taking you down the Dog and Duck shortly to join the Prince and Princess of Wales, who are there in Soho enjoying a pre-coronation drink. Maybe Mark might buy a round for us, who knows. Anyway, with less than 48 hours now to go before the coronation, royal fans have been out and about across London, camping out indeed since the start of the week to secure a prime spot for the big day. Deputy Political Editor Tom Harwood is in the Mall for us. And Tom, maybe they've got to enjoy the sunshine while it's there, because we're being told we may have rain on the day itself, which could even affect the fly past.
Perhaps, although I have to say that hasn't dampened spirits here on the Mall. The atmosphere is electric and the tent city here has been growing and expanding throughout the day. I've been talking to some ladies who've just set up camp today. And first of all, how are you feeling? Are you feeling excited? Not that long to go.
Very excited. It's a lovely atmosphere here, yeah.
And have you been to one of these before, one of these royal occasions?
Never in my life. Ever. Never.
What inspired you to come specifically for the coronation?
Well, my mum's always wanted to come and I didn't want her to come on her own. So now I'm here, I'm actually really enjoying it. Yeah.
Fantastic. And Mum, what exactly brought... What was the reason for you to come? Why did you feel that this was so important to camp out here?
I think it's being part of history. You know, this is us, this is our nation. When do you ever get to go to a coronation, see a gold carriage and people in crowns? So it's absolutely amazing. I just think it's brilliant for the UK.
Where have you travelled from today?
Wales.
All the way from Wales. That is fantastic. Well, so good to see the Welsh flag represented here on the side as well. And I have to say, we have who've travelled quite a far distance, because this lady here, and I'm sorry, do you remind us of your name? Kim. Kim, you've travelled from California.
Yes, Montecito, California.
And Montecito, California is important because...
Because Harry moved there.
And we were chatting and you were saying the last time that you travelled for one of these occasions in the UK, it was actually Harry and Meghan's wedding.
It was. I was here for the Chelsea Garden Show and they were getting married and there was such goodwill and such happiness about it, which they seem to have impaired since their departure.
And now they're basically your neighbours. How do you feel about that?
We're not happy. It's created a lot of hubbub and his wife is not well liked. They feel like she was the impetus behind disrupting his family relationships, and I feel that he was disrespectful of his grandmother, who was a magnificent woman. I'm here to celebrate. I mean, this is a historic event. Charles and I are the same age, so I thought I'd come and just... Britain has such a wonderful patriotism that we could learn a little from, even though we left them so many years ago. But it's really wonderful. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, all is forgiven for the revolution. You're very, very welcome here. And it's so good to see that you'll actually be staying here for longer than Prince Harry will be.
Yes, exactly. That's what I was telling you earlier. I'll be here longer than he is and participating probably more fully than he is. But it's a very wonderful occasion, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's been great to chat to you. Thank you so much for making the time. And I wonder if we can have any more words with any more people sat down here. Excuse me, sir, how long have you been camped here for?
Look, we only got here this morning, but my wife's going to be staying for the duration. So, yeah, that's the 2 nights.
And it sounds like you've come a fair distance.
Yes, Western Australia, so mad keen royalist over there. And, yeah, no, it's all good. A lot of fun, I think, yes.
Fantastic. And, well, I suppose that's all we've got time for in this segment. Back talking to many, many people down here along the Mall as the day goes on.
Tom, thank you very much indeed. So thousands gathering along the Mall and into the various squares there and Parliament Square as well outside the Abbey. But let's reflect some 30,000 almost over the weekend of the policing operation and armed services as well. Let's speak to Mark once more, who's in the studio now, because we've got this warning from the former Royal Protection Officer Simon Morgan about the protests that we understand will take place. Republic say it's going to be the biggest for 40 years. You know Simon Morgan. He's not going to say something like this lightly, is he, and go public with it?
No, I know Si very well. He's a very measured individual, but he is warning people of a fact, which is that there are many armed police officers, not just the overtly armed officers with, long-barreled weapons and
cock,
indeed, you know, there are handguns as well. They're the visible presence, but you've got close protection officers who are beside the many heads of state who will be whisking in and out of the Abbey. And of course, if they perceive someone running towards them, they don't know what that person might present in terms of a threat for the individual that they're guarding. So they do have to make a very quick time judgment
decision,
as to whether this is perhaps an eco-activist or perhaps someone with altogether much more serious intent. And yes, there is always a danger in these situations that, you know, someone could come to harm.
I mean, we need to reassure the public, of course, and say once again, there is no specific threat that the various police groups and special branch and so on have identified in terms of a direct terrorist threat. But clearly, they've got to be aware of not just the King and the royal family, but other international leaders as well in London for this occasion.
Yeah, 100 heads of state and VIPs from 100 countries around the world attending at the ceremony at Westminster Abbey.
And also in Soho, other members of various countries, America particularly, lots of tourists, because they're watching here the Prince and Princess of Wales have a lunchtime pint at the Dog and Duck.
Well, Mark, this is the perfect illustration of what the police and security services have to try to do to ensure that, you know, people like the royal family are accessible to the public. The last thing that the royal family want to do is to be cocooned and not able to be out and in amongst the people. You remember, of course, after the sad death of the Queen last year, King Charles then, as he was making his way to Clarence House, on a couple of occasions, they stopped a motorcade, he got out, walked for a couple of 100 yards, meet and greet with the crowd, completely spontaneous, the kind of thing that they like to do. That carries with it, of course, risk, because you never know. It might be anything from just a heckle to an egg being thrown to something worse.
Yeah, let's just actually, on this very fact, go through what we're seeing here. The uniformed police are actually facing the crowds. So they're looking across the crowds there, and clearly you can see them looking left and right. We maybe have plainclothes police as well, or Royal Protection Squad officers who will be linked up with communication devices and so on. They will have to let the royal couple do what they want, effectively, when they come out of that pub, if they want to go and greet people and talk to them.
Yeah, to an extent, you go with the flow. If they perceive an imminent threat, clearly everything changes and they will manhandle those principals, as they're called, away from the scene and into an armoured vehicle and out of that area in quick time. But yes, I mean, of course, if Prince William, if the Princess of Wales want to go and walk about and chat to people, they can do that. It's up to them.
Now, no sign of any yellow T-shirts. Not My King, of course, is the logo that the Republic Group have used at various occasions, where certainly King Charles, as I think York Minster, for instance, we remember, and indications that they are going to hold their biggest demonstration in 40 years. But they have made public, Graham Smith, that, you know, they've spoken to the police about what they're going to do and where, so that the police are aware about what sort of protests will be staged.
Yeah, it's really important to make the distinction with this particular group. They have done what the police always ask, which is engage. They're engaging with Scotland Yard. They're saying, these are the planned events. We will stay within Trafalgar Square. We will protest. We will be noisy, but we will not seek to disrupt.
Some pictures just coming in. Who could this be? Yes, I think that's the Elizabeth line, looking at the particular pattern on the seat there, is it?
Yeah, I was wondering when we would get these pictures.
Yeah.
Just before they got to the Dog and Duck, they took the Elizabeth line into town with all the unsuspecting passengers who obviously very quickly suspected when they saw the royal couple there, but also the entourage of security and not the world's media, but certainly quite a few media following that train into
and
town.
isn't it interesting? Such a contrast, of course. Yesterday, we saw them turning up at Westminster Abbey for the full rehearsal there of the coronation service, and they were in their bulletproof, bomb-proof vehicles in the convoy and so on, but taking the trouble to go on public transport today. There's a direct message being made here, isn't there?
Yeah, of course. As I say, it's accessibility is a key watchword for the royals. They really don't want a situation where they are sheltered, closeted away and not able to interact with the members of the public, because they know, of course, their popularity rests on that public engagement to a large degree.
Just to look at the details, though, of the threshold is the word they've used, and certainly the Met has said there will be an extremely low threshold before police intervene in what may be seen as criminal action. And yet they're still saying, anti-royalist placards will not be removed. People will have that opportunity to make that protest. I was questioning you earlier with Michael Cole. What's the situation then, though, if you've got like a counter-demonstration from royalists who say, stop making this protest, take those placards down?
Yeah.
There could be a bit of a flashpoint there, couldn't there?
I certainly think, that's always a danger. I'm not aware that there is going to be any kind of counter-protest as such. Anybody that's going to make the effort to get into town, clearly apart from this particular group, want to see the royal procession. Such what you get, the potential danger and flashpoint is when you get an individual throwing eggs, as we saw
Yorkminster.
in Yorkminster, and then they're tackled by.
And there we are. As we speak, look, there we are. The Prince of Wales is there speaking to people, and clearly being allowed access there and having quite an animated chat.
Yeah. And so he's working his way down that line of members of the public. Now, to an extent, those close protection officers, the plainclothes surveillance teams and the uniformed officers will have been scoping out the crowd as best they can, looking for anyone that might look suspicious, it might pose a threat. But how on earth do you do that? They come in all shapes and sizes, members of the public.
You did indicate to us that this facial recognition technology had been instituted and applied, but that's for a different reason. This is so known threats, known individuals.
Yeah, I mean, they said that they are still weighing up whether they are going to use it around the day. They haven't made, certainly as of yesterday, they hadn't made a decision, but they reserve the right to do that as an option. That's not going to be in play here, but what you will have, because we're right in the heart of central London, is many CCTV cameras, which are all patched through to big operations centre in South London, just over the Thames there, where everything is seen. Gold Command, they're in there overseeing
There's a huge bank
this operation. So they're looking at that. There's the teams on the ground, but of course it can only take you so far, because you just never know. Just by looking at someone, you never know what's in their head.
And you can see the camera phones here being held high for the selfies. The Princess of Wales, Kate, there managing to shake hands and also getting into the right frame and waving at those cameras, because this is the other aspect, of course, compared to 1953.
Is the world of the selfie.
The world of the selfie and social media and obviously getting your face in the shot. But they were traditional there, the flowers to be handed. Some things don't change, of course. But one can see the smiles on people's faces here in terms of this occasion. Now, I'm not quite sure how much notice they'd have had. Presumably the pub will have been told well in advance of what was going to be happening.
Yeah, the pub will have been told. There will have been a proper security check of the pub, of the surrounding area in the streets. These members of the public will not have been told that they're coming out to do a walkabout. They'll certainly have known that they're in the area, just for security reasons. Again, you don't want to...
They do seem to be quite well informed, though, in terms of the numbers that have arrived there behind the barriers.
It's central London and it's Soho, and it's always busy around there, and they get word that there's a visit, and they get themselves up there fairly quickly. And you can see everybody there just really pleased to see them and wanting to get that footage on their phones. Bizarre that they're face to face and they still view it.
Oh,
through
that's
a phone
another one there.
lens.
That's a real one for the album there. And one wonders, of course, how many of these people here in Soho on a Friday lunchtime might be visitors from abroad, or maybe just those people out for their lunch break, of course, in a very busy part of London. But
and you can see there as well, Mark, the close protection officers never far away, always in a position to intervene should they be required, looking at the crowd there.
And they've got their earpieces. Presumably they're getting information from, as you say, Goal Command. They're keeping an eye on these screens.
And with each other, which is even more important. Right. They're linked to each other, and anybody that sees anything untoward, that would be very quickly relayed, and they would act accordingly. But
I'm unable at the moment to tell you what was actually consumed at the Dog and Duck. One thinks it might have been a pint, but one remembers, of course, years gone by. I think Prince Charles's first foray into a pub, he ordered cherry brandy, I think, because it was the only thing he could think of at the time. But times have moved on somewhat, haven't they?
I'll bet you that some, enterprising brewery has probably... got a Coronation Ale out there, so maybe that was the tipple.
Yeah. However, this clearly is delighting people there in the middle of London, just 48 hours ahead of the coronation, with the pomp and circumstance, and a very visible affirmation of the role that the Prince and Princess of Wales are going to take in this new Carolean age, I think we call it, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're going to be right up there, and they are going to be busier than ever, along with some other senior royals, including, of course, the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, who is always busy.
Yeah, the busiest member, I think.
Of course, she absolutely is. But this is incredible to watch, isn't it? If you imagine that, people are coming to London from all around the world, Mark, many Americans and much further afield, here, and they're face to face with some, very senior members of the royal family. You can go to so many countries around the world where their royalty or their head of state would never get it out
whiz by
in and amongst
a vast rate of knots in the back of a car.
Well, look at the US and look at the huge motorcades, and very, very rarely, and it's always very well orchestrated if they do, would you ever get the US president going out and doing a handshake.
And conversations taking place. I mean, clearly we saw with the late Queen that she would have a word or two, but not really being involved in a protracted conversation, as is with the animated hand gestures and so on. They really are connecting with the public here, aren't they?
Yeah, certainly the Princess of Wales, you can see, she's a very disarming quality and very good at putting people at their ease. So is the Prince of Wales.
Yeah. Just you mentioned Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and of course she made this point the other day about the slimmed-down monarchy, perhaps not quite as good ideas as people thought originally, which was a telling comment. But we are being told that she's got basically a starring role in this ceremony. She will be Gold Stick in Waiting, that's the official title, a role historically handed to a person entrusted with the safety of the monarch. And she will travel on horseback behind the King and, the Queen, as she will be, Queen Camilla, after the ceremony, because, of course, she is still, I think, Queen Consort at the moment, but will become Queen after the coronation.
Yes, and there's no doubt that the Princess Royal, as well, assumes that a very key role, I think, as a key advisor to the
still
monarch.
Very close to Charles.
Absolutely, yeah. He will rely on her for her sage advice. And I think she was right, obviously, in what she was saying about the slimmed-down monarchy, because I think the point she was making, Mark, was that when the talk was of a slimmed-down monarchy, that was before the Duke of Edinburgh had died, the Queen had died, Prince Harry and Meghan had left, Prince Andrew was effectively out of the picture as well.
Now, an interesting reflection on these pictures we're seeing, and that is the age of the people in this phalanx along the streets in Soho, because we've had these various polls coming out in the papers about the popularity of the monarchy and the assertion that, well, for the younger generations, they don't have the connection, they don't see it as important. And yet we're seeing young faces in all these crowds.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of points on that. Certainly the younger royals and the Prince and Princess of Wales clearly fall into that category. They are very popular, not surprisingly, with younger members of the public. I think also the King is very popular with younger members of the public just because of his well-known views on issues such as the environment.
Direct involvement in the Prince's Trust in helping those socially challenged and so on.
So I think he's seen by many as a very thoughtful man who is very sort of conscious of issues such as the threat of climate change and the like. And I think that probably does make him popular amongst many younger people.
I just wonder, in terms of the preparation for this new look royal family, as it will be, that we are getting signals, the very fact that they've taken this trip by public transport today. He's not wearing a tie. He looks fairly relaxed, and we're getting these, quite in-depth conversations with the public. This is not a revolution, it's an evolution, isn't it, in terms of the way they connect with the public?
Yes, there's no doubt that the way in which the kind of royal walkabout has happened has changed quite a bit over the years since it was really first tried and tested by Queen Elizabeth II in her younger years, when she got out and about with the Duke of Edinburgh at that time, and it was the sort of walking about and handshake. So she did it.
And on the Commonwealth tours, of course, the overseas tours, it became a feature, didn't it?
Absolutely, she did it. But of course, in her later years, getting out and about quite as much to walk the lines was probably something that she was steered away from, and may well have herself decided not to do quite as much of that. But it's absolutely a task that's well suited to younger and fitter members of the royal family.
And of course, there was a reassessment. We were talking about Princess Anne, of course, after the shooting in central London, where, of course, as we now know, that perhaps there was a direct threat to her life.
Well, yes, indeed. You're talking from...
This was back in the 1970s.
Oh, right, with the IRA at that time, yeah. No, absolutely. She that was on the Mall, I think, wasn't it, outside Buckingham Palace?
On the route, basically, the carriages will be taken for the coronation.
Yeah, absolutely, where they tried to...
Right, I'm just getting some pictures. I don't know if we can actually get them. I think there are 2 foaming pints of what appears to be pale ale or lager being served up inside the Dog and Duck. We'll try and get you those pictures as soon as possible. Lots of flash photography going off at the time as well. I can't quite see what is on the glass, but as you say, it may be a coronation brew of some type. But
it certainly looks like an ale rather than a lager.
Drinking it. They're still talking quite a bit, but certainly it's been served up for them. So.
She's got her hand on it anyway for the photograph.
And
she doesn't look to be sort of swaying too much out there. So
I was going to say they didn't have too much time to actually savour it. They'd have had to have necked it pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah,
maybe.
I don't think it was a down-in-one scenario.
And apologies for the sort of interference on the pictures here, but bearing in mind what Mark's just been saying, of course, we do have police officers and close protection officers there at the scene, so our cameras have got to try and get a clear shot, bearing in mind that there is still a lot of security around the couple there, even though this is a fairly relaxed visit in Soho. I think we can go back there now, and there we are. As I say that, a hulking great Met policeman gets in the shot once more. But you can see them scanning these crowds all the time, Mark, and walking up and down there.
And they'll be doing exactly the same as we head to Coronation Day on Saturday. So, and the crowds will be so much bigger, and they will line, the entire 1.5 miles, I think it is, of the coronation route. So you will have, understandably, thousands of police officers. Now, they're being brought from the Metropolitan Police, the British Transport Police and the City of London Police in the sort of the the metropolis of London.
Because they know the patch, effectively. But I understand, I mean, there are other police forces involved as well.
Yeah, it's called mutual aid, so they have called on the assistance from other forces to help. So it will be, for instance, Mark, these seasoned sort of royal watchers or watchers of big occasions will have noticed the motorcycle riders of the Special Escort Group. These are the white police motorcycles that, take the Prime Minister, take the royals everywhere.
A few minutes ahead.
Yeah, they don't have sirens. They have a whistle, like a referee's whistle, just to, attract the attention of the traffic. Well, of course, that's a couple of dozen of these Special Escort Group riders, but not nearly enough to deal with what we will get on Saturday, which is heads of state and VIPs from 100 separate countries who will all require to be escorted to the Abbey. So some of the mutual aid from other police forces will be their traffic police motorcyclists who are being brought into the capital.
And what's the etiquette then in terms of police or security services from foreign countries? I mean, perhaps some relief that President Biden isn't attending because, of course, the Secret Service operation, when that swings in, that takes weeks to prepare for. But do they actually run their own operation, or do they liaise directly with Gold Command and the Met?
Well, they are responsible, of course, his own Secret Service for if it was the president, for instance, they would be responsible for his close protection. However, that is done in conjunction with our diplomatic and royal protection officers. They're there. They're the ones who are armed. You're not allowed as a foreign Secret Service agent, close protection officer, to carry guns in this country. So that role would be taken over by our...
And I guess when we're talking about this situation, as Simon Morgan, the former Royal Protection Officer, has indicated, you want to know who is there and where they are and what they're doing, because clearly if someone's walking around with a bulge under their jacket, that could be in itself seen as a bit of a threat.
Yeah, I don't think I'm giving away too much of a secret here because I'm not going to tell you the colours or anything, but you see with close protection officers the world over that they wear little badges, circles or other, they tend to be circles, and they will be different colours for different occasions, and then of course anybody looking at a man in a suit or not necessarily in a suit are going to know that that's one of their close protection team.
Trade secret without too many secrets being given away there. Well, still wonderful pictures here in Soho with the Princess of Wales in animated conversation with many people, shaking hands, and of course, as we were just saying with Mark, the ubiquitous camera phone there for the selfies. I think William has been on the other side of the street, but our cameraman, for some reason, seems to prefer Princess Kate. But we'll stay with these pictures as we bring in Cameron, our royal reporter, who is still stuck on his own outside Buckingham Palace. No chance of a foaming pint of ale for you, Cameron, at the moment.
No, I'm very unlucky, Mark, I'm afraid. However, I did just spot Harry and Meghan on the Mall, but not in the way you expect. They were actually lookalikes filming something else. So at least I've got some royalty with me. But yes, the Prince and Princess of Wales, we have now found out, travelled into central London today via public transport. They caught the Elizabeth line, of course, famously opened by Prince William's grandmother last year in Paddington. They caught the Elizabeth line from Acton Main Line station, got it all the way to Tottenham Court Road, before, of course, them walking from the new Dean Street entrance to greeting crowds on the way to get to the Dog and Duck pub even. Sorry, can't get my words out today. So they went in there, obviously having a few pints, as you just spoke about, Mark. But I think the main thing is actually just talking to the crowds, and we can see these live pictures here of Princess Catherine greeting members of the public who have been waiting for, I think, a good few hours before they arrived. And Prince William, as you mentioned, is also the other side of the street, but they've been meeting. I'm told that Will and Kate really wanted to meet local business owners, particularly from the hospitality sector and the nighttime economy, of course, who struggled during the pandemic. But of course, weekends like this, with a royal event such as the coronation, such as the Platinum Jubilee last year, really does have a huge boost to their economy. But when the Prince and Princess were actually on the tube, they were meeting TfL workers, and of course they've got a mammoth task ahead of them, trying to coordinate the travel arrangements of hundreds of thousands of people who are expected to descend on London to view the King's procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Abbey, and indeed the coronation procession in the reverse back again, following the procession, following the coronation service even. And in all the big royal parks in London, big screens are starting to be erected where members of the public can gather and actually watch the coronation from central London. But as we said, we know that the Prince and Princess have been taking part in rehearsals this week along with their 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, Prince Louis. Prince George, of course, is going to be a page for his grandfather, the King. But they are clearly wanting to make time to meet members of the public and indeed have a few drinks with some local businesses here in Soho, who no doubt are going to be very busy this weekend. It's one of a number of bank holidays happening in May, so there's going to be lots of money to be made. I think the Mail this morning the Mail on Monday was predicting a £1 billion boost to the economy, which seems amazing. But it was the British Beer and Pub Association which had predicted £120 million is going to be made from the coronation weekend alone. And I suppose this is exactly the sort of engagement which really helps to boost the economy.
And one might reflect, given the price of a pint in London, that's not going to take too long to rack up. We're still waiting for news as to what they were being able to be served there at the Dog and Duck. Hopefully we'll bring you those pictures in a moment. But also, we've got some very interesting pictures of them actually getting onto Elizabeth Line at Acton, as you say. And it appears that Prince William, Princess of Wales, and the Princess of Wales using their own Oyster cards to get through the barriers. So they really are doing it as any other Londoner would, which is a real change in tone, I guess, from previous royal generations. And the fact that Prince William here is attending this occasion without a tie even. He's got a suit on, but it's a bit more relaxed.
Absolutely, commuting for the crown, I think, Mark. Yes, Prince William does seem a bit more relaxed, not wearing a tie. In fact, his brother famously said in his memoir, Spare, Prince Harry this is, that he actually travelled on the London Underground only once, and that was to attend a school play when he was, I believe, at Eton. We don't know if Prince William has travelled on the tube before. I suspect Kate certainly has, before she was a working member of the royal family. But I think we are getting this sense from particularly the younger generations of the royal family that they are, A, doing things their own way, and also perhaps being slightly more informal. But if you notice, this was not something that we were told about in advance. It was only once they had safely made their way to the Dog and Duck pub, having got the tube and having walked to Soho, that we were told about it. And I suspect security is, of course, a major concern, because no matter how much the Prince and Princess would like to, of course, just simply commute and get a train or a bus with everybody else, clearly they are a security risk as the future King and Queen of this country. And I think that's just apparent from Tuesday, of course, when we had the security incident outside Buckingham Palace where the whole area was locked down. So it's a balance, I think, to be struck. But I think when they can do events such as this, then they certainly will do. But I think it's not going to be common. I think they still are going to be using police escorts majority of the time.
Indeed, as we've just been discussing with Mark, though, there are extraordinary pictures, because when you actually see particularly the Princess of Wales, they are so relaxed and happy in terms of engaging with people, not just a few words as we perhaps would have seen with the late Queen. You know, there's a protracted conversation going on, and they really are becoming engaged.
Absolutely, particularly William and Kate, actually, because I was with them in Wales last week, in Aberfan and at a local community centre very near the village. And at one point, Kate's private secretary tried to hurry her along, because they had certainly they'd certainly been there a lot longer than they were scheduled to be. And the Princess of Wales was having none of it. She was determined to meet every single person who had queued for hours in the rain in order to meet her, and indeed Prince William. And I think think they really genuinely, you can just see it from the pictures, they genuinely enjoy meeting members of the public and having ordinary conversations. But the Queen, the late Queen, did walkabouts. I think they started in the 70s. King Charles even, and Queen Camilla certainly do the same. But I think with William and Catherine, they're certainly perhaps seen as more down to earth than perhaps previous generations, which is why perhaps their popularity ratings among the latest polls show that they are very much on top compared to the King and Queen consorts. However, I suspect the King and Queen's approval ratings will maybe go up as we get to the coronation and indeed going forward.
Indeed, and a pint at lunchtime in the Dog and Duck as well. We're still trying to find out which ale it was. I think I'm right in saying the Duke of Edinburgh's favourite was a double diamond. I don't think they actually brew that anymore. And of course, Prince Charles, his tipple was a cherry brandy, I think, the first time he went to a pub. But things have moved on slightly. But we'll bring you those pictures as we get them. Cameron, for the moment, thank you for that in Buckingham Palace. And of course, the latest from Soho coming up as that walkabout continues. And we'll update you with the latest pictures. But let's just break away now to talk about sport with an extraordinary achievement. Manchester City striker Erling Haaland making Premier League history by becoming the top goal scorer in the league of all time. The Norwegian scoring his 35th league goal of the season last night against West Ham, beating the previous record of 34. Alan Shearer, I think, quoted as saying, "It's a special night and a special moment. I'm really happy and proud." And that was him in action, a real superman, of course. So let's now get the thoughts of broadcaster Chris Scudder, who follows a lot of these games. And it does seem, Chris, as soon as he takes to the pitch, people are waiting for him to set things on fire.
Yeah, the striking Viking, that's what they call him, Mark. He's physically, I mean, you look at him, it was the game the other week where he sort of plays with his hair in a kind of ponytail, and he let it down, and it sort of dropped down at the back. It looked like something from King Arthur's reign. He just an extraordinary physical specimen who a lot of people who know about these things think he's going to be just unstoppable for probably the next decade in British and world football, because he's just something out of the ordinary. Physically, he's tall, he's strong, he's fast. And, his record speaks for himself. He's breaking all kinds of records. He's scored 51 goals in all competitions this season. The last time that happened in the top flight of English, for any player in the top division of English football, was 92 years ago. And, of course, the goal the other night, he broke the Premier League record of Alan Shearer and Andy Cole. They'd scored 34 goals each in what was then a 42-game season. He's only played 31. Erling Haaland, he's got 35 goals now. So, the record speaks for himself. Just look at him. I mean, if you look at his Twitter account as well, Mark, he says, "We don't stop here. Destiny is all." He's a modern footballer where, it's not about, how many girls you can get and have, go out and have good times. He's a professional, and he just wants to break all kinds of records. Frightening for all his competitors, I think.
Yeah, and inevitably people will be thinking, well, is he the best yet? And I guess it's difficult because he's a completely different kind of footballer to previous goal scorers when we think back to the time of Jimmy Greaves or whatever, when they were poachers at the edge of the box. But one reflects as well, he's playing it within a team where a certain Pep Guardiola maybe is now being reassessed as the best of all time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people who say, well, he's bound to score lots of goals. I mean, it is the hardest thing in football to find a goal scorer. Let's get that right. I mean, but you have to have the supply in the first place. You've got to be there to miss them, if you like. And, he's got Kevin De Bruyne, he's got Jack Grealish, he's got Phil Foden, the most creative midfield in the world. So and when the ball comes to him, he doesn't miss usually. So it's a very potent combination. But yeah, I mean, he's in a team that is probably going to do the clean sweep this season, I would think. He's got, 9 games? He's got 5 Premier League games left. They've got the FA Cup final to come against Manchester United. They've got the Champions League, which City have never won. And that's why they brought in Haaland, because they're just missing something. They were just getting so close with all that money they've spent. And listen, there are plenty of people who say City shouldn't be allowed to get away with this. They've broken 115 rules, according to the officials who say that, listen, you've got to answer these questions. Whether they can wriggle out of this, I don't know, but there'll be a legal battle. But it tends to be the way that the clubs get their way, but as a sporting spectacle, you doff your cap to a great specimen who's, and City are probably going to win the Champions League as well, I think, this season.
And a joy to watch, of course, as well. Chris, as ever, thanks for updating us, and we'll see what happens at the top of the table, of course, with not much time to go now, of course. Thank you very much indeed. Now, let's update you on some international news now, with 2 Palestinian gunmen being killed in a raid in Israel, weeks after they're believed to have shot dead the British-Israeli mother and her 2 daughters. Maya and Rina D died after their car was shot at and then forced off the road in the West Bank, their mother Lucy dying in hospital a few days later. Well, the Palestinian gunmen, identified as members of Hamas, the militant group, exchanged fire with Israeli troops, we were being told, before being killed. Let's get more now with the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Jake Wallace-Simons. Jake, thank you very much indeed for your time. I'm just reading what Rabbi Leo D., the father, has said. We're tremendously comforted by the thought they were apprehended and eliminated. Some people may raise their eyebrows at that, whether perhaps it might have been better to have brought them to justice rather than killing them in a gunfight.
Sorry, excuse my wry smile. It's not because it's funny, it's because it's a smile of despair. I think the people who think that, policing doing counter-terror operations on the West Bank with a Hamas cell who have gunned down 3 British Israeli women in cold blood is like sending a bobby out on a Saturday night to pick somebody up from the pub are gravely mistaken. We are talking about not just hardened killers and terrorists, but also quite well-trained and sophisticated operatives who are militiamen. They're guerrillas, and it's not easy to kill them, let alone arrest them and put a pair of handcuffs on them and get them in the back of a jeep. So I think anybody who expects them to have been arrested, like as if they'd been guilty of shoplifting, is on another planet.
I think Hamas themselves have identified them, the 3 individuals, saying they're members of the group and actually claiming responsibility for the attack in April, so almost championing it in a way. But we understand that the Israeli military forces entered the city of Nablus in the West Bank and raided an apartment where they were located. So clearly there's been a huge intelligence operation going on behind the scenes.
That's right, and of course, Hamas is the ruling party in Gaza, following a civil war with Fatah, the other Palestinian faction that was pushed out some years ago, and now Fatah rules the West Bank, and this Hamas cell was on the West Bank. So, so it shows the depth to which Hamas's tentacles reach, not just in Gaza, but across into the West Bank. This was a very unusual daytime raid, for what reasons we don't know, but obviously I suppose it was to do with intelligence. And it just goes to show the continued threat of Hamas, not just to Israelis, but also in this case to British citizens. And let's not forget, this is a terror group that a certain erstwhile leader of the opposition called his friends, and does still command a lot of support here in the West.
Yeah, and still questions, I think, and Rabbi Leo D has indicated this, as to whether they were deliberately targeted or whether they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time in what is obviously a very violent area of Israel.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if they were deliberately targeted. These attacks do happen with a depressing frequency on the West Bank. We only heard about this one because it was British, the victims were British, but they do happen with depressing regularity, and they tend to be opportunistic attempts at taking life, either with knives or with guns, occasionally with bombs, and certainly with a lot of rocks. There were thousands, I think there was 3,000 terror attacks last year on the West Bank and in Israel proper, most of which we don't hear about, most of which are low-level stabbings and so forth, if you can call them that, lower than shootings and explosives anyway, although no less deadly necessarily. But this one cut through, and it does seem like, to me, as if all the indicators are that it was just an opportunistic killing, wrong place, wrong time.
But just to return to our original point about, trying to bring these people to justice, I mean, is the fear now that the very killings that have taken place could lead to yet more tit-for-tat violence there?
Yes, I mean, Israel and the Palestinians are very sadly embroiled in tit-for-tat, and they have been for decades. For every action, there's a response, and it goes on and on. Anybody who's seen the Israeli hit series Fauda, particularly the 4th season, which is rather realistic, will get a sense for the terror and the horrendous sort of deadlock of security versus terrorism and retaliation there. So yes, whenever there's a terror attack, there's a counter-terror operation, and then the Palestinian side once again launches terror in response. So unfortunately, this is a cycle we're locked into at the moment.
Yeah. Jake Wallace-Simons, editor of the Jewish Chronicle, thank you very much indeed bringing us your reaction to that news coming in. Just to reiterate, the Israeli Defense Force saying that they shot dead 3 members of the Hamas group who they'd returned fire indeed in this operation in Nablus on the West Bank. They'd raided an apartment where the men were located, and indeed Hamas indeed saying that they had taken responsibility for the attack back in April. Now, a new drug giving hope that the horrible progress of Alzheimer's can be halted. It's the second drug in under a year that's been shown to slow the disease, and scientists are calling it hugely exciting. The Alzheimer's Society calling the beginning of the end for the disease, indeed. The drug comes from Eli Lilly, the US pharmaceutical company, called donanemab, and already calls for it to be licensed here as soon as possible. But there are concerns about the ability of health professionals to diagnose the illness in time for the drug to have a big enough impact. Let's now speak to Sean Gregory from the Alzheimer's Society. Sean, thank you very much indeed for your time. And as we were saying, it's number 2 now coming through, and an indication that these drugs are actually using the body's own system, if you like, rather than sort of being imposed from outside, which means, I guess, there could be further drugs down the road that would help.
Absolutely. So donanemab is a drug that belongs to a family of drugs, the same as the breakthrough drug we saw, lecanemab, that are called immunotherapies. So these drugs do harness the body's immune system to essentially clear one of the proteins we think causes Alzheimer's disease from the brain. And they're not alone. There are other drugs that work in this way and other drugs that target other areas of the brain as well.
And just looking at its efficacy, one of the problems is, I guess, that the doctors have got to identify if this is Alzheimer's or whether it's actually some kind of other cognitive decline, because you've got to get it into the system very quickly.
So, yes, absolutely. These drugs are more effective the earlier they are given, and they've been tested in people with early Alzheimer's disease and early symptoms. And that's why at Alzheimer's Society, we're really focusing on the need for faster, earlier, more accurate diagnosis, because otherwise there could be a risk that if these drugs are approved, people would not be able to access them because diagnosis wouldn't be there in the NHS.
So does that mean GPs and people across the NHS will have to have some special training or some kind of Alzheimer's expertise to actually identify this as quickly as possible?
I think there'll be different amounts of training needed in different places. One of the key things we have to show in diagnosis for these drugs is that we can confirm that amyloid, which is the target of these drugs, is present in the brain. That's currently done through either PET brain scanning or it can be done through a lumbar puncture test. But there's exciting new developments in the field that Alzheimer's Society is funding research in, looking at blood-based biomarkers, so ways that we can look at blood to identify whether someone might have Alzheimer's disease as well. And so there's a huge amount of excitement on how we could make this process better, and that's really what research is going to do.
Yeah. How has this all happened? I mean, we know that, for instance, Sir Jackie Stewart, his wife is suffering with Alzheimer's at the moment, was calling for like a Formula One approach, the best brains thinking in the best way. I mean, has there been a really concerted effort to push this forward?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we've seen is a huge development in what's available in the research into the diseases that cause dementia. And Alzheimer's Society funded the first study that really identified amyloid in the causes of Alzheimer's disease, and we funded that research over 30 years ago. And now what we're seeing 30 years on is the development of that, the treatments that are looking to target that, and that research is continuing. So again, it's the best brains, and we have a fantastic program of researchers who are really tackling not just Alzheimer's disease, but all of the diseases that cause dementia.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, you really do think this is a breakthrough. I know this is often, whether like cancer treatment, so this is the best thing so far, but this is really quite revolutionary.
I think that's safe to say. At Alzheimer's Society, we're seeing that this is the beginning of the end. We've had 2 drugs in the last 12 months to slow down Alzheimer's disease. There's a long way to go. They aren't approved yet. They aren't available, but we've not had new drugs for over 20 years. And so we've never seen momentum like this in the field.
OK, on that note, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Sian Gregory, there at the Alzheimer's Society, and bringing hope to a lot of people, of course. Well, coming up in this next hour, not only will we be back to the Dog and Duck to see what particular refreshment the Prince and Princess of Wales enjoyed, we'll also be telling you how to celebrate the coronation with a proper cup of tea. All that expertise coming up for you in a moment. Stay with us.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Bright and blustery today. Hazy sunshine for most places, but the cloud thick in the southwest, bringing some outbreaks of rain, courtesy of this area of low pressure just anchored out to the west. But weather systems moving up will bring more cloud and outbreaks of rain, and the isobars are squeezing together. So a fairly brisk easterly wind, bringing a chill to North Sea coast and quite a bit of cloud to eastern Scotland. Thick cloud in the southwest with some outbreaks of rain already for Devon and Cornwall, spreading into parts of Wales. Hit and miss the showers, but some heavy ones are possible. For much of the Midlands, eastern England, Northern Ireland and Scotland, it will be dry. And in the sunshine, could get quite warm. 20 degrees is possible, maybe 21, but it feels pretty cold on some of these North Sea coasts. Temperatures staying in single figures. As we go through the evening, we'll start to see more showery rain working its way northwards, and that will continue overnight. So a very different day to come for most on Friday. Still have the easterly wind bringing some mist and low cloud to the east coast. Could get close to freezing in northern Scotland, but generally pretty mild across the south, so big temperature contrast. Won't be a cold start then, but there will be rain around. Initially, mostly outbreaks of rain for Northern Ireland, southern central Scotland and northern England. But during the day, skies brighten, heavy showers breaking out over the Midlands, eastern and southern England, parts of Wales too. Thunderstorms are certainly likely in places, so some hefty downpours. But away from the showers, certainly some of the coast staying dry and sunny. But again, it will be chilly on those coasts across northeast Scotland with a brisk breeze here. The showers will continue into Friday evening before gradually fading overnight, leading to something a bit drier to start the long weekend. But the weekend is a bit of a mishmash. Basically, if you've got plans for this long weekend, make sure you have a plan B for rain.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope? It's very much so. And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good afternoon. You're with GB News Live. I'm Mark Longhurst. I'm coming up for you this Thursday afternoon. Let's go down the dog and duck with the Prince and Princess of Wales. They made a lunchtime visit to central London, to the pub, and mixing with delighted crowds too, with just 2 days to go before the coronation. Yes, despite the security concerns, the Prince and Princess of Wales travelling to the pub on the Elizabeth line, appropriately enough. But a former Royal Protection Officer has warned any coronation protesters to remember this is all in the middle of a high-security operation with armed officers. Who did what at the Kremlin and why? The US National Security Advisor dismissing Russian claims that Washington was behind the drone attack on the Kremlin. And during a visit to The Hague this morning, President Zelensky says that Vladimir Putin should also be there to face charges at the International Court. Also coming up, just why has the Speaker of the House of Commons invited King Charles into his bedchamber tomorrow night? All to be revealed shortly after the latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Mark, thank you. Good afternoon. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 2, your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prince and Princess of Wales have been visiting the Dog and Duck pub in Soho ahead of the coronation weekend. Large crowds turn up to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. They've been in the entertainment district to hear how the hospitality industry is preparing for the big event. And to get there, the pair travelled on the tube, taking the Elizabeth line for the very first time. They chatted away to Transport for London workers about their plans for the busy bank holiday weekend. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's Vladimir Putin must be brought to justice for the war in his country. He made the comments during a meeting at The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based. It comes after Ukraine said it shot down 18 of 24 drones in an overnight attack. The bombardment followed a strike on the Kremlin, with Moscow accusing Kyiv of trying to assassinate President Putin.
Of course, we all want to see different Vladimir here in The Hague, the one who deserves to be sentenced for these criminal actions right here in the capital of the international law. And I'm sure we will see that happen when we win, and we will win.
Donald Trump's cutting his trip short to Ireland, saying he's going back to New York to confront his accuser in a civil rape case. The former US president, who's been visiting his golf courses, has described the case as a political attack and says he'll probably attend the hearing. He's been accused of raping a former magazine columnist in 1996, which he denies. 2 Palestinian gunmen suspected of shooting dead a British Israeli woman and her daughters have been killed in an Israeli raid. Maya and Rena D, who were 20 and 15, died when their car was targeted in the West Bank last month. Their mother, Lucy D, died in hospital a few days later. The victims' family say they've been tremendously comforted by the shooting of the suspects. Israel says a third militant also died during the operation. Voting is well underway in the local elections, with millions of people expected to cast their ballot. Around 8,000 seats across 230 local authorities in England are up for grabs. 4 mayoral elections are also taking place in Bedford, Leicester, Mansfield and Middlesbrough. It's the first time voters are required to show photo ID. Polls close at 10 this evening, with the results announced tomorrow. Travellers from Heathrow Airport are facing disruption and delays as security guards take further industrial action. That's after last-minute talks over a pay dispute failed yesterday. 1,400 Unite Union members have started a 3-day walkout today. It's part of an 8-day programme of strikes throughout the month. Labour and the Lib Dems have called for a robust windfall tax after oil giant Shell reported a profit of £7.66 billion in the first quarter of this year. Shell joined rivals BP in significantly beating expectations. The profits dropped slightly from the previous quarter as energy prices cooled, but it's still making almost £1.4 billion more than expected. A UK regulator has launched a review of artificial intelligence. The report will look at the tools and algorithms used to train computers to process and analyse data. The Competition and Markets Authority is focusing on competitiveness and consumer protection. It aims to ensure the developing technology isn't misleading people nor giving them false information. And 6 green apprenticeships have been selected to mark the King's coronation for their contribution in creating a low-carbon economy. They include low-carbon heating technicians, countryside workers and forest craftspeople. It's hoped they'll encourage more people to work in the green industry. It also aims to ensure the country's workforce is equipped with the skills needed to support the transition to net zero. The government and employers will use the coronation emblem to promote the apprenticeships, selected as the gold standard for green skills training. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to Mark.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Well, as it's lunchtime, why not take you back down the Dog and Duck? The Prince and Princess of Wales starting the coronation celebrations early by visiting the pub in Soho. Let's bring in our royal correspondent, who's still a bit thirsty outside Buckingham Palace because certainly unable to share the foaming pints of ale that they were delivering. We haven't seen them actually drinking it as yet, Cameron, but it's an interesting approach. The Prince of Wales in an open-neck shirt, no tie, jacket and trousers, both of them travelling on the tube using an Oyster card and then turning up at a London pub for a lunchtime drink. It's very different to the pomp and circumstance of the big day.
Absolutely, Mark. I think that's a pretty nice way to spend the day, actually, for the Prince and Princess of Wales. I have seen some footage from inside, which hopefully we can bring to you in the next hour or so. He's pouring a pint. He's behind the bar and he's been pouring a pint, this is Prince William, of Kingmaker Pale Ale. Now, we haven't seen anything of him actually drinking it yet, but nonetheless, I think it's a pretty significant name of an ale for such a week of the coronation. But they went down to the Dog and Duck pub in Soho. We've been told that the reason they wanted to do that was to meet the owners of hospitality businesses in the area, as well as the nighttime economy sector here in central London. Of course, an industry that has been really damaged following the coronavirus pandemic, but it's weekends like this, like the coronation, like the Platinum Jubilee last year and the bank holidays that we have in May, which really boost the economy. They also spent a lot of time actually outside the Dog and Duck, because you can see in these images here that hundreds and hundreds of people had turned out to meet them. They were waiting for hours, and the Prince and Princess spent a lot of time meeting individuals there, thanking them for being there to support them and greet them as well. And I think it's something that Will and Kate in particular are really comfortable with meeting ordinary members of the public. I was with them in Wales last week in Aberfan and the surrounding area, and they spent a lot longer than they should have greeting members of the crowd. I suspect it's a similar case today, and at one point Kate's private secretary had to hurry her along because she was spending too long talking to a couple of midwives who had turned out to meet them. But Kate was determined, as you can see in these pictures now, just to meet as many people as possible. But in order to get to the Dog and Duck, they took a very unusual form of transport for members of the royal family. They actually took the London Underground. So they took the new Elizabeth line, opened by Prince William's grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, last year. They took the line from Acton Main Line all the way into central London to Tottenham Court Road, got off at the Dean Street entrance and then walked into Soho, greeting members of the crowd along the way. Clearly, this was not announced ahead of time. You can see pictures on your screen of them riding the train. They met TfL workers on the train. That's Transport for London, for those of you who don't know, who, of course, have a mammoth task of trying to get all the hundreds of thousands of people who are descending on London to where they need to be on Coronation weekend. As well as that, of course, they have been taking part in rehearsals for the coronation. They took part in a big rehearsal in Westminster Abbey yesterday with the King and Queen consort, as well as their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, we've had two very special visitors on the Mall. Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, but it's not quite as you expect. It's two lookalikes who have been filming something else there. You can see it on your screens now for those watching on television. If you're listening to us on radio, I suggest you look at our social media channels because a lot of people are double taking, let me assure you. But perhaps they look slightly more like Harry and Meghan from the back rather than the front. But nonetheless, a nice little addition to the coronation build-up in the next couple of days, because I stood right by the number of tents which have now gathered on the Mall ahead of the coronation, so the people in them can bag the best spots for the coronation procession.
Well, Cameron, we were seeing the reaction the Prince and Princess of Wales were getting in Soho. As you said, people absolutely delighted and taking a long time in terms of conversation. What was the response to the lookalikes down there at the Mall? How were they taken?
Well, they were double taking, lots of strange looks. I think some genuinely thought it was Harry and Meghan for a second. They have a film crew with them and a lookalike bodyguard as well. I think a lot of people twigged that it was very much lookalikes. I think there are a few who make a lot of money, actually, by just looking like these famous royal figures. Harry and Meghan, of course, perhaps slightly more in demand than others. So we're not entirely sure what they're filming, but nonetheless, we're very much on the Mall. But we have had police escorts going up and down all morning and all afternoon, actually, containing various members of the royal family. It's understood the King has taken part in another rehearsal today. The Royal Standard has been spotted flying above Westminster Abbey. We're not quite sure if that's finished or not. We haven't seen him come back to Buckingham Palace yet. Yes. We also know he's expected to meet Indigenous leaders from both Canada and the Amazon rainforest as well. The Amazon rainforest one is particularly poignant, I think, for King Charles. This is all taking place inside Buckingham Palace. They're giving him a feather crown to wear as part of that audience, and it's all to thank him for his work in trying to protect the rainforest from deforestation. So again, it's that theme of sustainability and the environment, which we're really seeing shine through at certain small points during the coronation this weekend. Of course, the oil which King Charles is going to be anointed with, traditionally the coronation oil would have been made from animals, particularly whales. Now, of course, it's made from olives, so it's a vegan oil it's a coronation oil a vegan oil to use for the anointing of King Charles and Queen Camilla on Saturday.
Rather different to 1953, and an indication indeed from I think Kate, Princess of Wales, down there. So it's going to be a busy time. We're getting there. I still feel like we're getting or trying to get our ducks in a row. Indication of what's going on behind the scenes there. Well, let's get our ducks in a row by heading to the Mall and speak to someone who looks incredibly like Tom Harwood, or is it the real Tom Harwood there, who's been chatting to royal fans on the Mall, and a bit of a frisson of excitement there, Tom, with the looky-likies of Harry and Meghan.
Oh, certainly. There's a throng of people around those lookalikes a little bit further down. But I have to say, throughout the day, and I've been speaking to people since breakfast time here, the excitement has been growing and growing. And I'm delighted to be joined now by Bruce, who's travelled all the way from Michigan. And why have you done that today?
I think I must be a bit crazy or something. No, I'm just kidding. No, we came in here Monday night, and we wanted to come, my sister and I, for the coronation. So this is a huge event.
It's your first time in London?
First time in London, first time viewing a royal event, and so it's been a lot of fun.
And talk to me about your sign. You've got USA loves King Charles. What does King Charles mean to you?
Well, I think I'm going to speak for the USA. I think they've been very close partners, Great Britain and in the United States, for quite some time. And there's been like a certain admiration, between the president and the Queen over the years. And so I think there's a respectable bond between both nations, and that's what I think it is.
Well, it's fantastic to have you here in London for the big event. And are you hoping to get as good a view on the actual day as we do here? We're right next to the Mall.
It's going to take a bit of a miracle, but I think if I come here early enough in the morning, or my sister may hold a spot, maybe, and then we'll just kind of. I'm hoping to get a pretty good view, but we'll do my best.
Well, Bruce, it's been an honour chatting to you. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy your time here in the United Kingdom. Now, there are so many people who have been lining the routes with tents. The tent city has been growing and growing throughout the day. And some people who have pitched up include this lady. You've got one of these tents here. How long have you been here for?
Only since yesterday lunchtime.
That's that's a day already, and still 2 more days to go.
Well, I've done it before. I've done it for the Jubilee and other things, but the Jubilee was the longest. I came for the funeral twice, but the Jubilee was maybe 4.5 days, I think.
And what inspires you to get here, to get that front row seat?
Well, I'm British and I love the royal family, and the ambience is fantastic, and we meet people from all over the world, and we make friends I've made friends from people from the Jubilee that I keep in touch with, and several of them are here today.
I have to say it is remarkable seeing people all over from the Commonwealth, from the United States of America, from Australia. This is such an international event.
It is, and it brings money to England, to Britain, I should say. When you think that people complain about the royals costing money, well, I think they're working hard enough and doing very well, and I'm happy.
And what are you most looking forward to tomorrow?
Well,
or I should say Saturday.
I know, I keep saying tomorrow, I really get confused. I'm not really sure, because I love all the pomp of the soldiers and the horses and the little dogs searching to make sure everything's safe. And of course, I love to see the King and the Queen in the gold carriage. Or I have seen the gold carriage before, but I've seen it at the Mews, but I've also seen people in it. I think it must have been the Queen for one of her other Jubilees. But no, I think the whole thing, personally, and I don't mean to insult anyone else, but I think Britain does it really well.
Well, thank you so much for speaking to us. And there's a bit of a flavour of some of the excitement here just down the National Mall. People camping out for many, many days. Other people walking past to get a glimpse before the big celebrations begin, of course, on Saturday.
And, of course, speaking to Tom Harwood as well on GB News. What could be better? Tom, for the moment down there, thanks very much indeed. So, the coronation, as we were saying there, just fast approaching, and indeed millions across the world doing something special to mark the historic occasion. Let's just update you, actually, that an artist in Cardiff, Nathan Wyburn, has created a portrait of the King using Marmite and 42 slices of toasted bread to raise a toast during Coronation Week. So it's all happening. But in the case of English heritage, well, they've chosen to make a pledge which will see King Charles III commemorated for a very long time. Our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has paid one of their many sites a visit to find out more for us.
In 1953, the world watched as Queen Elizabeth II was crowned. Now, 70 years later, her son, King Charles III, will take his place on the throne, and people across the globe will celebrate his coronation however they see fit. King Charles has always been a huge advocate for British wildlife, working to ensure that habitats are both protected and developed. Last year, he played a big part in encouraging people to plant a tree in order to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. Now, less than a year later, the start of his own legacy on the throne will be marked by a very special and very wildlife-focused commitment from English heritage.
The King's coronation English Heritage is pledging to both celebrate 25 of our excellent meadows and actually work to improve those, but also creating over 75 more meadows right the way around England.
What was it specifically about the coronation and, of course, King Charles himself that inspired this pledge?
We know that King Charles has been a great champion for both cultural and natural heritage and a great promoter of meadows. And what better at meadows, creating 100 meadows on really important historic sites that, in a way, ticks both of those boxes and really celebrates.
Over the next decade, 100 sites will be cultivated and replenished, all in celebration of King Charles' coronation.
So this might be one of the wildflower areas we create. We've got the castle in the background, so we think this would be a great place for visitors to walk through, see the wildflowers as they approach the castle.
Here at Beeston Castle in Cheshire, the team are hoping that their wild meadow will help them to recapture the castle's landscape from back when it was first built.
Beeston Castle was created around 1220, and the landscape that surrounded the castle then is very much different to the landscape we see today. So back in 1220, the Earl didn't have a head gardener there to mow the lawn, and so what we're trying to do is recreate a meadow that would be similar to what was found back in the day.
Often nicknamed the Green King, what could be a more fitting celebration of our new monarch than this very green pledge from English Heritage? Sophie Reaper, GB News.
So that's the position on English Heritage. I think we can now update you on the other things that are going on to celebrate the coronation. Yes, there are the 42 pieces of toast with Marmite. I have to say, actually, that's quite impressive, isn't it? That's just coming in from Cardiff, where, of course, we were updating you on the artist who was putting that together, Nathan Wyburn, aged 33. There he is with his latest creation, looking very pleased, as might do so, because that's a very good likeness. I'm just reading it. He said, when I found out that the king himself actually loves Marmite as part of his favourite sandwich, that seemed even more fitting to know that he would totally approve of this. Took him just 2 hours to create the artwork, using one large jar of Marmite. The most tedious part, he said, was spending half an hour toasting 42 slices of white bread in his 4-piece toaster at his flat, going on, if a slice did slightly burn, I always just had to put it in a darker area of the portrait or scraped off the bits of burnt bread. He's a former 2011 Britain's Got Talent contestant, no less, saying that the King's distinctive features had helped him create the portrait. There we are. I'll leave that hanging in the air for you. But anyway, tasty treat for the coronation. Let us know whether you think you'll be partaking in anything of that nature. Views at gbnews.uk, because, of course, a lot of people love or hate Marmite. I think a lot of you will be loving that. Quite a creative aspect there. Coming up, more on the ongoing claims and counterclaims about what exactly happened or didn't above the Kremlin yesterday. We'll be updating you.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Now, President Zelensky has been visiting The Hague in the Netherlands, the home of the International Criminal Court, where the Ukrainian president called for Vladimir Putin to be punished for, quote, criminal actions, also repeating his request for more military support from the West.
It's time to make positive decisions for Ukraine on modern aircrafts, and there is no rational reason to postpone such decisions to train our pilots.
Well, that's the president speaking there in The Hague. Let's now go to Ukraine itself and speak to Andrei Osachuk, a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, joining us. Thank you very much indeed for your time here once more on GB News. Just to get an update first on what the Russian reaction has been, I gather there have been quite widespread air assaults overnight on various Ukrainian cities.
Yeah, the night was quite loud in Kiev. The air defense was working based on report from Ukrainian military. A dozen, I think, of kamikaze drones were intercepted. So the pieces of drones was mentioned in the different parts of the city. But at the moment, sun is shining, the weather is good. So we adapted to this reality.
Was expected that certainly Moscow was indicating it was going to retaliate. But what's the interpretation there, what went on at the Kremlin? Because clearly now Russia is trying to say not only that it was Ukraine, but maybe US-sponsored as well.
For sure, everything what is happening in Russia is by Ukraine and sponsored by United States. But let's try to be serious and analytical. If you look back to, for example, your professional career in media, I don't think that you ever seen such a great quality video of any terrorist attack or any attack which was important for any big city in the world. Plus, you must understand that this video was taken from the video cameras, which under full control of FSB and people responsible for Putin security. And we know that Kremlin is probably the most protected area in the Russian Federation. And you see that the attack was so precise that one may say that it was done by the sniper. And if someone thinking that it's possible to do it from the territory of Ukraine, so theoretically it's possible, but in reality not.
So you
it was.
You share this assessment then that this may have been a so-called false flag attack by the Russians themselves to try and get some reaction?
There are just two options: or it was fully organized by Putin and FSB, or we are witnessing, as we say, the fight between Kremlin towers. There is no any other option besides these two hypotheses.
Now, what is the next step? Because clearly people have pointed to the fact that on May the 9th, you've got this victory parade through Moscow where they celebrate defeating the Germans in the Second World War, the Nazis. It is a very important time for Putin and for the Kremlin leadership. But is there any indication that Ukraine will be launching its spring offensive and taking the fight to Russia itself?
Look, we are not Russians, and we are not dedicating our offensive actions to any date. We will do offensive when our military will decide that they're fully ready, because our main target is not just to liberate our territories, but also to reduce our losses, our potential loss. Coming back to May 9 parade in Moscow, which is absolutely iconic event for Putin regime for the last decades. Now, after this incident in the Kremlin, they have two options: or to cancel parade, as they already did in dozens and dozens of Russian cities, or to bring Putin to parade and to show him as a hero, like the guy who is not afraid to appear on parade under the threat of Ukrainian drones. So they have options, but we know that Putin very much concerned about his safety and security. So I think that they will decide in the last moment, somewhere in the evening of the May 8th.
Okay. Yeah, now we know President Zelensky has been in The Hague calling for Putin to go before that International Criminal Court. But in terms of Putin being removed from the scene, if, for instance, there is an attack and it does remove him from the scene, is it going to make a difference in terms of Ukraine's relationship with Russia? Or is there perhaps Medvedev stay in the wings waiting to keep this aggression going as far as Russia's concerned?
The future for a moment is very uncertain, but what we know for sure that now we are fighting not just to liberate Ukraine and to restore international borders and to restore international law. We fight to not let it happen again. And it is possible only through punishment of everyone who committed war crimes in Ukraine. And definitely Putin is client number one for International Criminal Court in The Hague. So that's why we don't care about the future of Russia. We want to dismantle regime, and we want to bring everyone who committed crimes to accountability through international court. And again, it is very important not to make this court somewhere in Ukraine. It should be internationally recognized court, and the best place for this is The Hague, where Zelensky today, in fact, repeat what I'm saying now.
Yeah. Andrei Osachuk, member of the Ukrainian Parliament, thank you very much for updating us there in Kyiv and joining us here on GB News. Thank you for your time. Well, more, of course, to come on that situation as regards the Kremlin, but let's get an update, too, on the rest of the headlines. Rhiannon's waiting for us.
Thank you, Mark. 2:33, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prince and Princess of Wales have been visiting the Dog and Duck pub in Soho ahead of the coronation weekend. Large crowds turned up to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. They've been in the entertainment district to hear how the hospitality industry is preparing for the big event. And to get there, well, the pair travelled on the tube, taking the Elizabeth line for the very first time. They chatted away to Transport for London workers about their plans for the busy bank holiday weekend. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's Vladimir Putin must be brought to justice for the war in his country. He made the comments during a meeting at The Hague, where the International Criminal Court is based. It comes after Ukraine said it shot down 18 of the 24 drones in an overnight attack. The bombardment followed a strike on the Kremlin, with Moscow accusing Kyiv of trying to assassinate President Putin. Donald Trump is cutting short his trip to Ireland, saying he's going back to New York to confront his accuser in a civil rape case. The former US president, who's been visiting his golf courses, has described the case as a political attack and says he'll probably attend the hearing. He's been accused of raping a former magazine columnist in 1996, which he denies. 2 Palestinian gunmen suspected of shooting dead a British-Israeli woman and her daughters have been killed in an Israeli raid. Maya and Rena D., who were 20 and 15, died when their car was targeted in West Bank last month. Their mother, Lucy D., died in hospital a few days later. Israel says a 3rd militant also died during the operation. And voting's well underway in the local elections, with millions of people expected to cast their ballot. Around 8,000 seats across 230 local authorities in England are up for grabs. 4 mayoral elections are also taking place in Bedford, Leicester, Mansfield and Middlesbrough. It's the first time voters are required to show photo ID. Polls close at 10 this evening, with the results announced tomorrow. TV online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2573 and €1.1385. The price of gold is £1,620.98 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,733 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the finance report on GB News for physical investment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching. Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories. Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us 4, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to GB News Live. Let's just bring you a bit of breaking news, actually, we're getting from the Foreign Office. James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, saying that a total of 2,450 people have been evacuated from Sudan on the 30 flights back to the UK. The final flight from Port Sudan departing last night. James Cleverly saying that we've coordinated the longest and largest evacuation of any Western country and brought those 2,450 people to safety. But we remain focused and supporting those in desperate need of humanitarian assistance and continue to press for a long-term ceasefire. So clearly that's a very large airlift in terms of those individuals. More reaction on that as we get it. But let's reflect now that car sales in the UK, well, they're gearing up. The Society of Motor Manufacturers reporting an 11.6% rise in new car registrations in April, and that's meaning the numbers are up for the 9th month in a row. The latest figures marking the best performing start of the year since before the pandemic, and it follows, of course, months of production problems fueled by global supply chain shortages, particularly in those all-important electronic chips. Let's get more now with Liam and On the Money. So it's good news, but there's still a question mark as to what people are buying and how confident they are in electric vehicles or what's happened to diesel. All these questions going into the melting pot.
So this is our monthly pit stop, Mark, with the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, a big organisation that compiles data on car sales, car registrations across the country. And from the data this morning, we can see that in April, 132,990 cars were registered. That's up 11.6%, as you say, Mark, on April 2022. But it's still 17% lower than in 2019, the last full year before the pandemic. So, yes, car sales are recovering. Those semiconductor shortages you referred to, they are now easing. Supply chains are freeing up after the disruption of lockdown. But the British car industry is still selling a fifth fewer cars than before the pandemic.
So that's pretty significant. And, of course, we were thinking that maybe electric vehicles, EVs, would boost sales, but people are being a bit wary. It's not the real sort of solution as some would see it, because clearly there's a question mark about the charging infrastructure, for instance.
The whole Western car industry is gearing up big time for the shift away from internal combustion engines, pure petrol and diesel engines. The UK still has a law in place that by 2030, those engines won't be allowed to be included in new cars, though cars that are on the road will be fine. And that's 2035 in the European Union. And there's a lot of speculation that could go to 2035 here in the UK as well. But let's just have a look at the breakdown of car sales in April, Mark. Petrol cars, they still dominate. That's pure petrol, 42.8%. 2/5 more than of all cars sold. Diesel below 5% now, just straight diesel cars. But look at those so-called MHEVs, mild hybrid electric vehicles. These are hybrids that charge themselves. They've got a battery, you don't plug them in.
But it's still a petrol engine.
Still a petrol engine. So you can get the benefits of an electric vehicle without that range anxiety because you don't have to plug them in. They're now 18.5%, almost 1 in 5 of all new cars. And pure battery electric vehicles, those that you can only charge by plugging them in, no petrol or diesel at all, that's 15.4%. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Yes, the number of battery cars, the mild hybrids, the plug-in hybrids, if we say all of those kind of electric cars, the big category, they're a third of all new cars now. But what the SMMT is saying, and they say this with some reluctance because the whole of the car industry is trying to move us towards sort of battery cars.
Yeah, exactly.
What the SMMT is saying is that they are now cutting their growth forecasts for how quickly battery cars will be taken up. And they're talking about things like range anxiety. They're talking about things like the difficulty of charging when you get somewhere because there isn't enough charging infrastructure. And also the fact that a lot of battery car owners during the last year when their electricity bills have gone to the moon.
It's not cheap.
It hasn't actually been that much cheaper than buying petrol. I discussed all this earlier with Emma Butcher of the SMMT. Here she is.
What we are seeing is concern over those broader economic challenges that we're seeing, the cost of living crisis, the rising cost of energy. That all has an impact on what you might decide to buy next. And equally, the huge obstacle that we face is a real paucity of charging infrastructure. So that's really putting a lot of buyers off making that leap into an electric car.
And of course, not just for the buyers now, but the manufacturers. You know, what do they do? What do they invest in? You've been reporting from the northeast, of course, on whether we're going to get this battery, gigafactory, and you know, what sort of motor manufacturers would tie up with that. I mean, they're having to sort of reassess a little bit now, aren't they?
There is a bit of reassessment going on. Yes, there is. You know, for the SMMT to talk about a paucity of charging infrastructure. This isn't an organisation that likes to criticise the government, the car-making industry, the government. There's lots of business going on between them. They need to have a sort of even-tempered relationship. That's quite a big statement there by the SMMT, that there isn't enough charging infrastructure. And also, you know, we need to build these gigafactories, we're told, because you build the electric cars near to the batteries, because the batteries are very, very heavy and very, very expensive to transport.
And even to import the hard stuff to make them as well.
The lithium, the cobalt, all the rare earths and so on.
Yeah.
And I think with all this energy security being highlighted after the war in Ukraine, all this new emphasis on energy security, a lot of people are now questioning whether or not EVs really are the answer, that this is the way we should be going. And that's why, you know, companies that want to build gigafactories, making those batteries, they're finding it hard to raise finance.
Yeah. Now, you were talking about the EU. They're going a slightly different route, thinking maybe, you know, we keep hold of the combustion engine, internal combustion engine, but we have greener fuels. And, of course, there's hydrogen as well that they talked down there. I mean, where are we on this, you know?
But this is where it gets really interesting. I've been covering this for a long time and really focusing on it. So that we have really good technology in this country. What JCB are doing in Staffordshire, running, you know, they now have developing a full range of hydrogen-powered vehicles, not just lighter vehicles. You know, the full big,
the big yellow
360-degree radial JCB, the famous iconic backhoe loader. They can now run those on hydrogen.
Right.
There's a company down in Wales that we feature quite a lot called River Simple, a scientist called Hugo Spowers. He is developing high-performance hydrogen racing cars. You've got Joe Bamford over in Northern Ireland building a bus factory, completely hydrogen-powered. The British government, though, has been quite slow to really get hold of this idea of using hydrogen, turning it into what's called green ammonia, and then you use it in an internal combustion engine, and the only emission is water. Now, that's still quite a difficult, scientific, energy-intensive process, but a lot of people think that may be the way we're going.
The greenest of all options. Liam, thank you for taking us through all that, and, of course, we'll update people with all the latest facts and figures coming through on the state of the economy as well, as we try and look for the green shoots. But a bit more positive news now on the health front, because a new drug is giving hope that the horrible progress that Alzheimer's has been making can be halted. The second drug, indeed, in under a year, that's been shown to slow the disease's progress. Scientists, indeed, calling it hugely exciting. The Alzheimer's Society calling it the beginning of the end for the disease. The drug's coming from Eli Lilly, the US pharmaceutical company, called donanemab, and already calls for it to be licensed here as soon as possible. But concerns, too, then, about the ability of health professionals, GPs, for instance, to diagnose the illness properly in time for the drug to have a big enough impact. Well, joining us now is Scott Mitchell, husband of the late Barbara Windsor and, of course, ambassador for Alzheimer's Research UK. And, Scott, this is something that you and others, Jackie Stewart as well, have been really hoping for, this sort of quantum leap in terms of the treatment. You must be pretty relieved that at long last something's happening.
Oh, I cannot tell you. I mean, as you just said, the fact that in the past few months we've had two significant breakthroughs now in drug trialing, and it's what we've always said. It is all about the research. We will absolutely get there. I think we also have to be cautious to a certain extent as well, not to kind of get too excited that it's all going to happen tomorrow. Number one, I think I must say, I'm not a medical expert. The work I do as an ambassador for AR UK is very much about campaigning for awareness and fundraising to aid research. And we can see now that everything that has been going on in terms of funding and research, it's starting to have an effect. We now know that there is going to be treatments that will slow this down, that will halt it eventually. We are on the right track, and hopefully, future generations will not have to go through what I went through and what millions of other families are going through with their loved ones.
Yeah, well, you sort of people have described it as losing the individual while they're still alive, which is just a terrible thing for friends and family to go through. But what's interesting, because it's attacking this amyloid, the toxic buildup inside the brain, but using the body's own immune system. So, I mean, this is the exciting thing, isn't it? It's the body being able to cure itself to a degree.
Absolutely. And because of all this research, these kind of treatments that are now being kind of sent forward to the regulators, well, we know that they're not going to be available most likely for a couple of years, but it doesn't matter. We are so much further down the line now. And also, we will build on the formats now that are coming out with these treatments. Scientists are going to kind of build on that. They're going to look at what's happening now. Of course, I said just now about being cautious, because there are side effects from what I understand from the information that I've seen so far. There are certain side effects which are pretty negative that have happened in a few people so far with this new drug. All of that has to be looked at before it will be passed as a safe drug to be put out into the wider system. But as we say, we're just building on this and building on it. We are making major gains now, something that maybe 5 years ago we wouldn't have dreamed possible. But because people are getting behind it, people are talking about Alzheimer's, they're talking about dementia in a much, much wider way now. This is so important for our society. 1 in 2 people now either would have had personal experience or will know someone that's had personal experience. And that is a huge stat. 1 in 2 people. Let's think about that. So going forward, we can only be on the right path. I'm sure there's millions of families out there that have been reading the news the past 2 days who will have a real sense of excitement as far as, going forward is concerned. I mean, I've always said maybe it will be too late for me. But if I can think that this may be helpful for my nieces and nephew or my great nieces and nephews, then what a wonderful thing we've all done being a part of this.
Yeah, and the efforts, as you say, are still continuing. Well, Scott, thank you very much indeed for joining us once more, and a bit of positive news once more in terms of the fight against Alzheimer's. Thank you very much indeed.
Absolutely. Let's keep doing it. Thank you.
Scott Mitchell there, the husband of Barbara Windsor and ambassador for Alzheimer's Research UK. Now, let's reflect that it is the coronation. We've had the Prince and Princess of Wales enjoying a lunchtime pint down at the Dog and Duck. Elsewhere, retailers saying that coronation-themed products flying off the shelves. Shoppers putting up the bunting, preparing for the street parties. Indeed, shops expected to sell 3 times more sparkling wine and champagne. But for a lot of people this weekend, it is that British cup of tea that will only do in terms of celebrating, especially at the street party. But that raises the question, how does one take one's tea? Well, joining us today is Ayub, who's tea expert and founder, no less, of National Tea Day. Joining us in the studio. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Oh, and you brought a real array of paraphernalia, or sort of bits and pieces that really tell the experts from us British breakfast tea. I know that Prince Charles, or King Charles rather, as we call him now, likes Darjeeling.
Correct.
Is that the top of the tree? Is that the poshest?
Well, it depends who you're speaking to, actually.
Oh, right.
So the great thing about Darjeeling, so firstly, that is the choice of tea for King Charles III. Darjeeling is one of the only teas, actually, that has provenance. So much like Prosecco, champagne, feta cheese, if the tea isn't plucked and harvested from the Darjeeling state in northern India,
call it that.
You cannot call it Darjeeling. So it is definitely one of the posher ones.
Yeah, and one assumes that you are then talking about a leaf tea that you put into a preheated teapot. You don't just dunk a tea bag in and out.
No, well, you only have to look at the history of tea in Britain. When it first arrived to the British shores, it was a truly royal occasion. It was Catherine of Braganza, who just so happened to be King Charles I's wife from Portugal. Well, when she came to Britain, she was horrified to discover there was no tea. So anyhow, there was a letter written to the East India Shipping Company, and the first teas were sent over to the United Kingdom for
Which
our
I
enjoyment.
guess would have been quite expensive, therefore, because of the cost of importing it.
Correct. It was the height of sophistication. So rumour has it that the lady of the house would actually guard the key for the tea caddy around her neck. It was so highly prized.
Right, OK.
Yes.
Now, the other aspect to this is, I know, again, King Charles enjoys his tea, I think, in a bone china cup.
Correct, yes.
But what about, you know, the bog standard tea mug? I mean, is that, again, a no-no? What's the proper etiquette?
It depends on the occasion.
Right.
So the correct etiquette for tea is definitely fine bone china. And actually here we have a gold fine bone china tea set from our partners, William Edwards, which is actually 22 carat gold.
So there's real gold in that?
There's some real gold in there. That's why when you saw me bringing it in, I was
you were very careful.
tiptoeing. So it's very, very precious. And of course, the story with fine bone china is also interesting. So there's a debate, isn't there? Is it milk first?
Yeah,
milk
exactly
second?
my next question.
Exactly. Well, when fine bone china first came to fruition, it was a compromised material. So the fine bone china wasn't designed to withstand
because you've got to be
temperature
careful
of the water. So in the first instance, when one would use fine bone china, it would be milk first.
Right,
and
just
then
to
you'd add
ensure
the
that it doesn't
tea.
overheat.
Correct.
Right.
However, Spode innovated the fine bone china that actually had a protection that would allow you to add hot water straight into the teacup. So then, obviously, the royals transferred their kind of habits to putting the milk in after. So the correct way really is to put the milk in after, so you can really assess the colour of your tea and make sure that you get the perfect brew.
So it's not too
much
milky.
milk. Exactly,
indeed.
correct.
And just talking about the tea sets, I mean, this is the other aspect. People love to collect tea sets, and we've got the coronation sort of dark blue, I think, isn't it? The official coronation tea set. I mean, this is, again, something that people really enjoy just to, you know, you talk about Spode, other makes are available, Wedgwood and so on. This is part of the sort of British process as well.
Absolutely. It makes the occasion, doesn't it? You know, when you have fine bone china, it's, for us, afternoon tea time is an experience, and it's something that you can enjoy for 17 hours of the day. From 6 a.m. all the way through to midnight, you know, you can have cups of tea. But if you're having an afternoon tea and socialising with friends, loved ones, it's so fitting to get out the fine bone china.
And as we speak, I'm trying to hide the GB News mug with coffee in it at 2 to 3 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Yeah, apologies for that. I should have got that out of the way.
Yes.
Well, we're out of time, but as we're coming off air, I'm going to, have something with you, maybe a Darjeeling or something.
Fabulous.
Or Lapsang Souchong, that's the other posh one, isn't it?
That is a posh one. We have a Lapsang Souchong, actually, in the Royal Court collection, so fabulous.
Right, OK. Well, thank you for taking us through the proper way to have a cup of tea. Very important for the coronation. Well, that's it from us here in the studio as we take time for tea. But Patrick is coming up outside Buckingham Palace with the very latest. And, of course, we'll be updating you from the Dog and Duck and elsewhere as we head towards that coronation.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more important,